All right, what's going on, my friends? How are you doing? Know I feel like I said this yesterday as well. It just feels like there's not a lot to do with Star Wars right now, which just sucks because this is the month for Star Wars. But today, if you guys are interested at all, I wanted to do a watch party for the Phantom Menace, but specifically the documentary I put out 2 years ago now, the Phantom Menace 20 years later. And we'll probably, since I can do this just straight through my stream, you guys don't have to watch or click play at the same time I do. You can just watch along with me. And it's perfect because there's going to be no copyright problems. I own the documentary I made, it'd be kind of a shitty situation if I play it and then I get hit with a copyright strike. I think that happened on Twitch. I can't remember what band was playing, but let's say something like Motley Crue was playing. They were doing like a live performance, and then Twitch like got taken down, or maybe the YouTube stream it was, because of the company who owns whatever the band was. They copyrighted the video. So it just goes to show that copyright system and the algorithm isn't normally that great. But the good news is I made this documentary. Any copyright problems I had with it is a very long time ago. We can see, and this is probably going to be the first time I've actually watched this documentary from start to finish in probably 2 years, probably since it came out. So I'm interested in doing this. I hope you guys enjoy my documentary. But if you have any questions as well, leave them in the live chat. I'll address them. Anything about the Phantom Menace, the making of this documentary, George Lucas, the first Star Wars in general. I was actually just watching the Phantom Menace like 5 minutes before the stream started. I was watching a little bit of it last night and today. Still not my favorite, but it doesn't matter. So without further ado, if you guys want to, we can just I said we would wait a few minutes. Said we wait for some people to join, get the stream going. Let me put it out on Twitter or something like that. Let me check my phone. I got to be that guy. Let's see. I have my YouTube channel, and then I have like another YouTube channel. I have like another YouTube account, so I can actually watch like channels and stuff that I like. But I of course did subscribe to my own self, so I could do this stuff. So I could copy the links to stuff and post it on Instagram, Twitter, what have you. So let me put that up on Twitter, my Instagram, and as you guys join in, you guys can reminisce what you guys remember about the Phantom Menace. Were any of you alive when this came out? Did any of you like remember going to see this movie in theaters when it first came out? Let me give a second real quick. I got to turn this off. All right, I'm back. So let me put this up on Instagram real quick, my Instagram story. All right. It's always fun trying to do multiple things at once. We're live. Swipe up to join. All right, there we go. Did I put the link though? All right, yep, we're good. So that's up, and let me put it up on Twitter real quick. Hopefully some of you have already joined and are ready to watch this. Menace. Instead of Phantom Menace, it came Phantom Menace Ace. That was funny. Phantom Menace 20 years later. ... 2 years later. All right, I did my publicity. All right, we're done. How is everyone doing? Oh, you saw the 3D re-release. That's funny. I did not see that when it came. I love how a lot of you are like, I was still in the womb when this was coming out. Antas didn't even exist. I was negative 2 years old. It is kind of baffling because I'm not going to say I thought I was young. I'm still young. I'm only 22. But it's funny to think that there are people who, of course, I forget what they call it. But there's like a word for the realization that everyone in the universe is living just as complex of a life that you are. And it's always fun. A big shout out to Stephanie Sharp says, to be honest, I hold your docs up with the Plinkett reviews as required reading when introducing someone unfamiliar to the story of the Star Wars franchise. Keep it up. I really appreciate that, actually. I don't think throwing the I think they're more informative than the Plinkett reviews in some sense, but I think the Plinkett reviews really do a good job, at least with the Phantom Menace specifically, and we do talk about that in this documentary, of course. They do a good job of showing why people were really upset with those films upon release, and kind of, I guess, that old guy route of it. I mean, Mike Stacklasa, the guy who made those reviews, isn't old, but he's one of those guys who's from a different generation of movie making and love. So it's different. I really do appreciate that, though. I would hope that as time goes on, my documentaries not only improve in quality, but they do become that kind of thing where people look at them and go, okay, this isn't, and my opinions of Star Wars only aside, I can actually look at this and learn something from it and enjoy doing it. That's the big thing. I want you guys to learn something from it and enjoy it. So we'll have a good one. Dang, John says he was 37 when this came out, and Paul says he was 17. Dang, that is that's a time jump for you guys, I bet. Man, first question is, what was the 90s like? A second question would always be, you guys remember the hype going into this? This is going to be a nostalgia trip for everybody. So if you guys are ready, let's just get into it. I feel like as people come in, they'll keep coming in. So like I said, if you have any questions you guys want to ask, send them away. Miss Only is away at the moment. She's at work right now, so the boys can play. I'm getting a call real quick on my phone, and I'm pretty much guaranteeing it's a scam. You guys want to listen to this while I answer? Let's do it. Hello? Did you hear that?
Yes, hi, it's Ryan calling with AARP Security. How are you today?
I had to hang up on Ryan. I'm sorry. I have no idea what AARP Security is. Anywho, Crawling Chaos. I was 22 when this came out. Dang, so you're 44 now, buddy. I'm not saying that to be like, oh my God, but like you're I'm half your age. Like on the dot, I'm half your age, pretty much. That is wild. That is wild. Yeah, the hype was insane. And Thursdays are for the boys. AARP is for old people. Thank you for thank you for telling me. Which release of the Phantom Menace do you watch? I watched I think it's right now I just watched the Disney Plus version, but I think I watched the Blu-ray version. So if you guys don't know, there are different versions of the Phantom Menace. There's the cut. They're not that jarringly different, actually. There's one. The first theatrical cut has a puppet Yoda because they couldn't do digital CGI at that time up to that level. And then the re-releases, not even the re-release, but then later on they added a CGI Yoda. So that's kind of the different versions you can have, but there's also like small, minute changes. But I don't think there's more than maybe 3 or 4 versions of the Phantom Menace. Jake Lloyd, the actor who played young Annie, thinks that there is a 6-hour cut of the Phantom Menace. I think that's an assembly cut. I don't think he's right about that. But anyways, let's just get into the documentary, guys, and have some good time. So here we go. Without further ado.
1994. Today is my first day of writing the new Star Wars series.
I guess you could call this in a sense a director's commentary, but whatever.
All I need is an idea.
The fact that it's so anticipated allows me the freedom to sort of be creative in the way I'd like to be creative and not have to worry about what people think.
I've noticed I have audio problems with this stuff. I didn't really understand how to keep the music low, but amplify his voice where it's understandable. Gibberish HS says, have you thought about making a documentary off of the Clone Wars TV show? I really have. The problem with that is there's almost not a lot of footage to kind of show, like behind the scenes wise. So with something like that, I can do something like this for the Phantom Menace. There's a lot of footage I could pull from, even though I wasn't around at the time.
Star Wars, the Phantom Menace.
Jesus Christ. Dang, yeah, my audio problems are really bad. Like, it sounded like it was really low, and then out of nowhere, you just hear this high motherfucker 20 years ago. Like, who was there? Yeah, so the Clone Wars will be a fun documentary to make if I ever get around to that. But that's something that I need to. I wouldn't want to just do it like I did the Phantom Menace one. I actually would want to interview Star Wars fans, but more importantly, people who were involved with the creation of the Clone Wars and kind of get that information in order to give you something of merit. These stories are passion projects, and the documentaries are really complicated to make in a sense that I want to catch everyone's attention, of course, but also retain that attention throughout the entirety of the documentary or whatever you're watching. So that's where the Clone Wars one will be a little hard, is that I'm not extremely passionate about the Clone Wars. I love the Clone Wars, don't get me wrong, but being passionate about it is different. So it's not like it has a history that needs to be revisited yet, because for a while it was confusing. You know, we had Clone Wars seasons, and then Disney bought Star Wars, canceled the Clone Wars. We got some limbo, and then season 6 came on Netflix. Then Clone Wars was dead. Season 7 came back. So there's a lot of history to go through, but all of that is very, I would say, I don't want to say relevant, but it's very new. It's all happened within the past 10 years. The Clone Wars really isn't that old. So it's going to take some time for me to be able to find people for that kind of stuff. So let's continue with this. I'm going to turn down the audio in the documentary just a little bit, see if it helps. Released in theaters all across the world. The day was May 19th, 1999. This marked the return of the Star Wars saga. George Lucas was bringing back his franchise to the big screen. Oh, man, I really didn't do my due diligence on the making. This one I rushed. I rushed the shit out of this. You guys know the day before the Phantom Menace released was my birthday. So the day before I put this documentary out, I spent probably 14 hours editing it, because I refused to put it out on a day that was not May 19th. And I was just lazy. So I grinded for like a few months before this came out, and then the night before it released, I grinded nonstop. So that's why you hear a lot of these, like I even pronounce things weird. I just said, instead of like George Lucas, I went to George Lucas, like very fast. It's very annoying. I can't believe I did that to myself. With a brand new trilogy, Star Wars Episode 1 became one of the most anticipated films of all time. The first big day for Episode 1 was in September of 1998, when George Lucas announced the title, The Phantom Menace. The title would be the first disappointment fans had with the film. Star Wars enthusiasts assumed the name would be either Balance of the Force, Guardians of the Force, or The Clone Wars. So what's interesting about the title, I actually could do a little bit more research on the Phantom Menace topic itself and the hype going into that movie, but I feel like it's a moot point now. But people didn't like the name The Phantom Menace for one specific reason, and that is the two M's. So when you pronounce Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, or let's even go to the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, you'll notice I'm not really having to pause to say any of the words, but when it comes to the Phantom Menace, it's because those two M's. It goes the Phantom, that word ends with an M, and then the next word immediately after starts with an M. And because of the way we pronounce things in English, you cannot use that to roll off the tongue. You have to stop saying the word Phantom in order to begin the word Menace. And that really upset Star Wars fans, surprisingly, back in the late 90s, because they were like, it's the Phantom Menace. It's not something like you could say with Attack of the Clones, where see how quick I just said Attack of the Clones? When I say the Phantom Menace, I have to stop the Phantom to say Menace. It's such a stupid criticism, but I remember hearing about that and being like, wow, we are petty motherfuckers. Dang, a car burned out behind me. Let's go. Fans even began to believe George Lucas would change the title a few weeks before the release of The Phantom Menace, just as he did in 1983 with Return of the Jedi. But the excitement for Episode 1 exploded in November of 1998, when Lucasfilm released its first trailer for Star Wars The Phantom Menace. The trailer was shown at 75 theaters in the United States and Canada. Star Wars fans would pay full ticket prices just to see the trailer.
You actually paid to go in to see a movie just to see the trailer, and then you left?
Yes, because it's an awesome 2.5 minutes.
For one showing at a theater, about 500 people showed up, only for over 300 of them to leave after the trailer ended. Not only that, movie tickets were being sold out. Like the movies that were being shown with the trailer, The Phantom Menace, those tickets sold out. Like those, like it was kind of one of those things where you almost wanted The Phantom Menace to be shown before your movie. No one's going to watch your movie. So many people would walk in and leave, but you got a lot of sales in the box office because people just wanted to show up to watch the Phantom Menace trailer. Very, very unique for that time. You will never have that again. I really think we should bring stuff like that back, but people would leak it on the internet. Online in March of 1999, the trailer was downloaded over 1 million times in the first 24 hours, and grew up to 6.3 million downloads within 3 weeks. And this was before the time of YouTube and the modern day internet. As the days grew closer to the release of Episode 1, the anticipation continued to build.
Well, it's a marketing dream.
Almost 400 people lined up in the cold drizzle at midnight to be the first to get their hands on the new Star Wars merchandise. As Peter Clemente reports, it's just the tip of the iceberg of the interest generated by the soon-to-be-released movie.
On May 3rd, 1999, the toys for the Phantom Menace went on sale. It was called Midnight Madness, a night where Star Wars fans would wait for hours outside just to buy the toys for the newest film.
You got enough stuff, do you think?
No, but I got a limit. I spent $324.
$320.
Okay, so this is kind of a cool fanboy moment for me. Not really of a fanboy. It's not like this guy's famous. This guy right here in the video, he actually commented on the documentary, like the actual video of this, the Phantom Menace 20 years later. He commented and said, "Hey, like that's me right there. Like I remember the hype." Like he was kind of nostalgic for the documentary, and that's the stuff that means a lot to me. And the fact that I think that's so cool. The fact that he was not only on a news channel that night, back in 1999, I think it was March as well, Midnight Madness. But the fact that like he stumbled upon my video 20 odd years later after this had happened, and like even just commented and everything, like the fact that he's still around in Star Wars stuff, that means a lot to me. That was really cool to see. And I don't know, I thought it was cool, the fact that some guy watched it and was there. All right,
$324. But that's nothing, because I just ordered myself a Han Solo frozen in carbonite from North Carolina.
227,
and now that he says that, I really wonder if he still has it.
I believe.
Yeah? Was it worth it?
I guess so. If it's worth money, I guess it's worth it, yeah.
How big a Star Wars fan are you?
Oh, this must have been
On
the
your
coolest
cell
shit back then.
Darth Vader was the first action figure my dad ever got, and it's the first movie my dad ever took me to see.
How old is Dad?
So this one's for you, Dad. This one's for you.
Yeah, a lot of that footage and a lot of this footage just comes from like hype and the reaction people had to the toy campaign. I mean, there were so many people. Yeah, the stuff is extremely cringe. Oh, this part right here is cringe to me. This guy.
Gone. This is the one for my personal collection.
Those are the people I hate, because I was at Toys R Us at midnight, 12:01, when they were selling those toys, and people like that grab like 8 or 9 of those figures. They have to have everything's got to be perfect, and then they go and they sell them for like $30 or $40, and that's the reason why Star Wars fans like me cannot get what we want.
That's funny to me, and that's funny because it's still a thing today. I mean, you go to Star Wars Celebration, and they have a merchandise store where everyone just goes and buys, and then they resell it for sometimes 3 times the price. It's ridiculous how many people are just hounds in Star Wars. They don't even do it because they love Star Wars. They do it because of the merchandising and the resale value. People do that with VIP Jedi Master tickets at Star Wars Celebration. They normally sell for like, I think close to, like when you buy it from Star Wars Celebration, it's like $800, and then you'll have these scalpers who sell them for probably $4,000 to $2,000 at minimum per ticket. And if you guys ever think about doing that, please don't fucking do it, because it's not even worth it anymore because they've changed the system so much. Yeah, people were hurting Star Wars merch. Because see, the idea was, off of the original Star Wars toys, is that all the Phantom Menace toys and all the prequel toys were going to be worth just as much as the original trilogy toys. And what's sad is that it actually didn't happen. But back then, it was thought that it was going to be worth a lot by then, or not by then, but by today's standards, like 22 years later. But a lot of these toys aren't worth shit. Some are collectible, some are rare. But a lot of toy stores and a lot of toy manufacturers who were, being saved by Star Wars, some of them were ruined by Star Wars and the bad perception people had to the prequels, because after the prequels released and after the Phantom Menace released, toy sales for Star Wars were not that good. Star Wars was known as a toy empire. The toys generated more money than the films, and made it a Hollywood tradition to release toys alongside every summer blockbuster. Yeah, by Star Wars was the first one to do that. This was the biggest merchandising campaign in cinema history. Toys R Us had sold over 1.25 million units of the Phantom Menace on May 3rd alone, Darth Maul being the most popular toy. 1 million units in one day. One day you sell 1 million units. That's crazy. May 21st, George Lucas had the film released 2 days earlier on May 19th. George said changing the release date was to give fans a head start on the film so they could watch it during the week and families could watch it over the weekend. Could you imagine they do that today? Could you imagine we get a Star Wars film and then like a week or two before the film even comes out, they announce, hey, we're bumping it up by 2 days. That unheard of. I can't believe George did this. Like, some of the stuff is like kind of coming back to me, but the fact that he did that is really wild. Imagine doing that today. I think fans would have freaked out. This move showed the confidence George had in the film, and meant fans would be able to see the film even earlier than expected, making the anticipation continue to grow. There was simply too much hype for the next Star Wars film. Fans waited outside theaters for hours just to buy the tickets. Oh my god, fucking Palpameme. You're the wrong Palpameme, and I, like, lovingly hate you, and you know goddamn well why. Me and him, we always fucking argue in the DMs. It's no ill will, but fuck you at the same time. It's like Brian from Family Guy. Hey, go fuck yourself, but come back Sunday. I miss it when you're not around. The best Star Wars movie. The best. Come on. Oh, man. Oh, Palpameme. And then waited for days in line until the movie was shown. It would be an understatement to say that people were looking forward to The Phantom Menace. This was an event across the nation that everyone was talking about. An estimated 2.2 million people took sick days off in America, costing the U.S. economy $293 million. This was a movie to define a generation of fans. That's really cool. Good luck.
Phantom Menace, the hype machine surrounding the new Star Wars movie is now in full gear.
If you have to ask why, then you'll never be able to understand the answer.
Damn it, Bobby.
It's kind of like Star Wars all over, the original, A New Hope all over again for my generation.
We thought we'd try to recreate that hype, but on a much bigger scale for the Phantom Menace.
It's going to be one of the many wonders of the world. There are now 8 wonders of the world. One of them being this movie.
This is a huge deal for me.
I think everybody wondered why they watched it after that. They were like, oh, all right.
I was sick from school today.
Yep.
It's the movie event of the decade. That's why we're here, all of us.
Perhaps one of the most anticipated and most hyped films absolutely ever. Now, will it live up to that hype? Well, these fans say, who cares? It's Star Wars.
How old were you when The Phantom Menace came out? The answer is easy for me. I was a day old, literally a day old. How old were the rest of you? Some of you were not even born. Some of you we saw in the comments were 17, 37, 22. Someone said they were negative 2 years old. And so it's funny how different we all were at that time, of course.
How sweet it is. It's very, very tasty, especially with these tickets in my hand. I've waited since 1 o'clock in the morning for these babies. They're sweeter than Anakin Skywalker.
I don't expect it to live up to the hype unless Jesus bursts through the screen and comes back. It'll probably be a letdown for most people. I just want it to be a good movie.
I grew up.
Everybody commented about that guy and were like, he's Alex Jones, or like, he's funnily the only guy who got that right and everything. And it's funny because even George Lucas said something about how fans were expecting the second coming of Christ with that film. And that's definitely how that felt at the time, I imagine. It was, I think anyone who lived that, and I'm sure our friend Crawling Chaos here can attest to it, anyone who lived through the Phantom Menace hype, there was no hype for any other movie that was even close to this. You guys talk about Avengers Endgame or Avengers Infinity War. No, I'm sorry, nothing. Even The Force Awakens was not on a level of the Phantom Menace.
With these movies and the re-releases and everything, it's just always been a big part of my life.
I was 5 years old and went to go see Return of the Jedi with my father, and it's just an experience. It's more than a movie.
I've been waiting 15 years since Return of the Jedi came out to see the prequel. There's no way it's going to be a disappointment.
Ewan McGregor. That's funny.
It's going to be a lousy movie.
Yep, no one thought it was going to be bad. As opposed to me and like The Last Jedi. I knew The Last Jedi probably wasn't going to be good going into the movie.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't trust reviews. I got to form my own opinion, and I'm sure everyone will vouch for me because reviewers don't know anything.
What are you going to do if the movie really
This one's funny.
Probably see it again.
We're talking
probably see it again. It
Episode
sucks.
1, The Phantom Menace. It opens tonight at midnight. And getting in to see the premiere isn't easy. First, people had to line up to buy tickets, and now they're lining up to get good seats.
That's funny. I remember Empire Magazine giving The Phantom Menace 4 out of 5 stars, saying, so it turns out it's only a movie after all. that was the sentiment for a lot of people after The Phantom Menace came out. It was, oh, maybe we were looking at Star Wars wrong. I feel like a lot of it was, losing that childhood memory of like when you're kids and you watch Star Wars, it's mind blowing. But then you're older and you watch it, you're like, oh, okay, so it's not life altering. And that could have just been a result of the prequels not living up to the hype or not being the quality storytelling that they should have been. But it's still interesting how the narrative around Star Wars did it not an entire 180, but I want to say an entire 180 at that point, because some people already were upset about the special editions, but that was Star Wars fans. Everybody was upset with the Phantom Menace. I wasn't born yet, but my brother said it took 3 times to realize it was bad. That's another trait. A lot of Star Wars fans who watched this movie went back and saw it countless times. Some people saw it up to 15 times in theaters and still hated it. Like, they said, like, oh, it's not a good movie 10, 15 years later. But then you're like, well, why did you go watch it so many times back then? They're like, first of all, it was the first Star Wars movie I'd seen in 16 years. Second of all, part of it was it was like therapy, like coping with, oh my God, I actually don't like this movie. It's kind of jarring that's how people had to deal with it, because you didn't have YouTube at the time to tell you why you hated it, or look at the scenes like we would today.
16 years we've been waiting for this.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. For some people, seeing this movie is just short of a religious experience.
Yeah, it was likely to not.
Did it live up to its billing?
And this is a new phenomenon, to actually line up for tickets to an event that doesn't happen, to a movie. I mean, concerts maybe, but this is a movie, and it's going to be around a long time.
And we were talking earlier.
22 years, baby.
Whole thing, it's what, more a phenomenon?
I think it's more of a phenomenon. Star Trek with the Trekkies, that's kind of a cult, but this spans generations, and people want to take their kids, so it is an event.
The atmosphere in the theaters,
I think we can now say it was a
fans
cult.
cheered when the Lucasfilm logo appeared on screen. Excitement reached its all-time high when fans saw the opening crawl to the newest Star Wars film. May 19th, 1999. The Phantom Menace had officially released.
Well, that's part 1 of the documentary. We got all the goody good feels all the way. You guys remember 1999? You remember the hype? You remember when we didn't know what was gonna happen? Like, we're always nostalgic for that stuff. When things were good. Lord Vader asked, how old were you when the Clone Wars came out? Well, if that came out in 2008, let's say it came out in May. I was probably 9 years old if it came out in 2008. I remember seeing that movie in theaters, the Clone Wars movie, and walking out, man, what the fuck was that? All right. Oh, it didn't press play. Oh, it did. Yeah, I have this little break.
Now, over the past 20 years, there's been some debate about how people reacted to The Phantom Menace. There are those who say the film was loved by audiences, and didn't receive the online hate until many years after the film was released. Others would argue that the people hated the film the day it was released. You'll find that both of these positions have some truth to them. The first reviews of The Phantom Menace came from film critics, who shared the reviews before its May 19th release. Critics who went to the early screenings warned fans what they said would be a major disappointment. The Empire Strikes Out was the start of one review, claiming the film was joyless and would disappoint the most die-hard Star Wars fans. Entertainment Weekly put out 11 critical reviews from the top critics around the world. Of those 11, 4 were positive reviews, 2 were mixed, and 5 were negative reviews.
That's not a bad
Common
number,
critiques from
actually.
the
It's like
critics
50%
included the
didn't
acting
like
in
it.
the movie, notably Jake Lloyd as young Anakin, and Natalie Portman as Queen Amidala. Critics felt a lack of engaging emotions throughout the film. The special effects were praised by everyone, but some noted that while The Phantom Menace looks visually beautiful, it lacks any real story or character that connects with the audience.
That is one thing that I've noticed a lot of prequel fans talk about is like, I'm not going to mention who, but I was listening to someone's private like Discord server live stream thing, and this one guy was like talking about the prequels, and he's like, what a lot of people don't realize is that the prequels were so revolutionary with their special effects at the time, and people forget that. And it's like, no one forgets that. The problem is that was the focus of the prequels. The focus wasn't on the story, it was on the spectacle of the prequels, and it was a spectacle of Star Wars. And then when it got to the story, it just kind of was put on the back burner. So a lot of people were upset with that, but everybody was shocked by how beautiful the movie looked and revolutionizing it was with the digital technology and special effects of that time. It was crazy. It was crazy the stuff they were pulling off in this movie. There's only one shot in the entire movie that does not have a digital effect, and that is a shot within the first 5 minutes of the film where you see the smoke coming out of the vent to poison Qui-Gon and Ben Kenobi. That is literally the only time they do not have a digitally enhanced shot. Everything you see in this movie is digitally enhanced some way or another. There's some kind of CGI fuckery with it. Is that an awful thing about a movie? No, but it goes to show where George went from not one extreme, but using film to a complete extreme of I'm not going to use almost anything that's not digital. Like that was a huge jarring thing to do at the time. And I think we would argue that as time goes on, we look at it and we're like, it may not has aged as well as we thought it would.
It's a pretty good bad film, as one critic said, a statement that seems to have followed The Phantom Menace for the past 20 years. May 19th, 1999. earlier that morning, BBC had a headline that read, "Fans rave over Star Wars." Later that same day, the headline changed to, "Fans have mixed feelings over Star Wars." In Los Angeles, the film was received poorly by fans, with one telling a BBC reporter, "Everyone has a lot of mixed feelings about it. It was a good movie in terms of special effects, but in terms of storyline, plot development, and character development, it wasn't." The Phantom Menace did receive a substantial amount of praise in other parts of America, like New York, where audiences loved the film.
I think that little Anakin Skywalker, and everyone's going to say it, stole that movie.
It was amazing. It was everything I thought it was going to be and more.
It had good effects. I'm not too big on the acting, but hey, that's just me.
Overall, our informal...
Wait. What about the fans who go, "Oh, but I didn't know that people didn't like the Phantom Menace or the prequels until I got on the internet"? Like, dude, people just didn't like the prequels, and no one had the heart to tell you about it online. That's mostly what that was. If you're a disenfranchised person from Star Wars, you're likely not going to continue to talk about Star Wars. Aside from Yoda, the horrible CGI and overly used green screen, cheesy aliens, and non-threatening, comical bowling pin battle droids. Oh, bowling pin. I don't want to say bowling. Bowling pin battle droids still take me out of every prequels every time. Still take it. Yeah, they're definitely not threatening. Still have my old VHS copy. Do you have that of the Phantom Menace, or do you have it of the original trilogy? Because VHS copies of like the Phantom Menace, yeah, you're taking me back. They didn't. Well, that's actually not that far back because they didn't release DVDs for the original trilogy until 2005, 2006. That's something people forget about that George Lucas did, which was kind of fucked up. Lord Vader says, "I remember people saying Qui-Gon's death got leaked because the score from the movie came out, and one of those scores was Qui-Gon's Noble End." Yeah, a lot of the movie actually was semi. I mean, there's some fake leaks, of course, that came out before this, but there was some stuff that did come out where there's so much of the movie that was leaked that Weird Al Yankovic, and I added this in the documentary, but I had to take it out because they copyrighted me for using Weird Al Yankovic's Saga Begins. I just used like a 10-second clip from the music video, and they copyrighted it. So I took the whole 2.5 minute or even 3 minute segment out. So I guess there is another cut. There is the Star Wars only cut of the Phantom Menace 20 years later. I never thought about that until now. But yeah, there was another cut of this that I did where I had Weird Al's part in. And I talk about how Weird Al Yankovic, before seeing the Phantom Menace, wrote that song. And if you listen to the song, it is very accurate to what happens in the movie. I mean, verbatim, it's what happens in the movie. He knew all of that before he even went to go see the movie. And that's all because he did stuff online. He did research. He was keeping up with the leaks. And so he kind of pulled a weird move where he bought tickets to a charity event where basically, like, I think it was disabled kids, or I think it was disabled or artistic kids. They were going to a premiere of the Phantom Menace that happened like a week or two before it came out, and he got tickets to it. Weird Al Yankovic got tickets. He watched it, and it just confirmed that his song was accurate. So I think that's crazy how he was able to get that before the movie came out.
A survey of 19 people after the midnight show tallies up this way.
Really?
7 liked it or thought it was okay, and 2 are no longer Star Wars.
See, that's not even bad though. I mean, 10 loved it out of the 20 or 19 that you polled, and only 2 of them hated it. That's crazy. But yes, release the only cut. They don't have the balls to put it out there.
I want to bag the movie, but I really didn't think I cared about the characters.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
God, I'd put my feet up if I could.
Thumbs way down.
You didn't like it?
No, I think I deserve a public apology from George Lucas.
And that's where the entitlement comes in for the Star Wars fandom.
Fans and audiences praised the Phantom Menace for the special effects. The new planets in the film looked stunning. It had the first ever fully CGI character in film history. That character was the infamous Jar Jar Binks. Meant to be the comedic relief of the Phantom Menace, Jar Jar Binks was a goofy character with a goofy walk and a heavy accent. Older fans and critics hated the Gungan, who would go on to be one of cinema's most hated characters of all time. The strong reactions to the character were due to his heavy accent and goofy walk, and he was what many people called...
George would add a lot of CGI to the documentary.
Said the character of Jar Jar was a racist one. Within 2 weeks of the film's release, Jar Jar became a debate among film critics and die-hard Star Wars fans alike, even leading to the creation of a website called Jar Jar Must Die. People who despised the character claimed the racism came from his Jamaican accent, and that the ears of the Gungan character represented dreadlocks.
How in the world you could take an orange amphibian and say that he's a Jamaican? I mean, even the idea of taking his ears and calling them dreadlocks is kind of a strange stretch as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's completely absurd.
Okay. Before we continue on, I do want you guys to comment either yes or no. Do you think Jar Jar is racist? And not intentionally racist by George Lucas, but do you understand why people could see it as racist? Because I will be honest, as someone who did grow up in Texas, the South, and I grew up in a predominantly Black and Hispanic community, I was I always joked around. I was the minority around minorities. I was the only white kid in my school up until about probably 8th or 7th grade. I definitely found Jar Jar to be a little racist at times. It's not because he walks or acts funny. It's, to me, it was sometimes just the way he talked. Like the whole Yusa, Misa. I'm like, okay, that's a little. I'm not saying I think he was intentionally racist or I think it is racist. I'm just saying I could see how people thought it was racist at the time. And if you don't think that was racist, do you think the Nemoidians were racist at all? Because that's what a lot of people claimed about this movie, is that the Nemoidians were caricatures of Chinese people, and Jar Jar was a caricature of blacks, and what was his name? Watto, the salesman guy, the junk dealer, that he was a caricature of. I don't know if it was Jewish people or Arabic people, but it was people. Everyone just thought the movie was racist, like at the time, and you got to think race relations in 1999 were actually surprisingly a lot better than they were, I think, in the past like 5-6 years. So everyone thought it was racist at the time. But if you guys don't think it is, then maybe I'm wrong. But I mean, yeah, okay, I can see why, but it was not the intent. You're right, it wasn't the intention. But you know, when the Nemoidians are like, "Oh, I was not expecting an attack," I'm like, well, that. It's almost like, is it racist that I'm thinking this is racist, or is it actually racist? Or that's a self-realization we all have. Like, wait, I'm the racist, and we all go to camp or something like that. I'm glad. I'm all right. I'm glad I might be in the minority here. People, yeah, okay. I could see the Nemoidians more than Jar Jar. Yeah, the Nemoidians definitely a little bit too, not too on the nose, but those are the ones you're like, okay, maybe we could have thought about that. I think Jar Jar's a little more forgiving. I agree with Lucas on being like, I don't know how you got dreadlocks or a Jamaican accent from what we've seen. I definitely don't see that, but I do see how some people would go, huh, that's a little odd.
Despite the early reviews from the critics that loathe the film, and the mixed reception among Star Wars fans, the film,
That's
of
a good
course,
point,
was
too.
a financial success. It made over $28 million on its opening day, which beat the previous record holder, Jurassic Park, by $2 million. The Phantom Menace was also the first film to make $100 million within its first 5 days. Episode 1 would be cemented in culture history. It never mattered how good the film was. The Phantom Menace would always be a movie the world will never forget. During that summer, audiences and Star Wars fans had time to re-watch The Phantom Menace, and as time went on, the film did not receive better reception from the people. Fans and critics alike said the film showed that George Lucas was more interested in the money Star Wars could create, instead of the stories, but The Phantom Menace was not remembered fondly. Fans voiced their criticisms online, and some even began to make their own versions of the movie. The most popular fan edit of Episode 1 is called the Phantom Edit. It takes 20 minutes out of the original film's runtime, and made Jar Jar more of a silent character who was not in the movie as often. When the Phantom Edit hit the
Now, to be fair, the Phantom Edit was actually a big deal back then. Like, news people covered it. This was something that was popular even among Star Wars fans, and it was so popular. I even talk about this in the documentary that George Lucas wanted to watch it. Now, listen carefully. You'll hear me say the fucking dumbest thing I think I've said in a long time. I say interpreted wrong.
internet, fans praised it for being a better film than The Phantom Menace. Fans began to share it all over the world. They would watch it at home with their other friends and discussed it in online forums. It became so popular that a group called the Phantom Edit Network began to sell copies of the re-edit. No one knew who made this. Even George Lucas was interested in seeing the re-edit of his film. Rumors went around that Kevin Smith made this edit, but he publicly denied this. After seeing that their film was being resold, Lucasfilm warned fans that it was illegal for anyone to sell the Phantom Edit. After this, Lucasfilm said George Lucas lost any interest in seeing the re-edited version of his film. The fan edits of The Phantom Menace can easily be interpreted as criticisms of George Lucas in his latest Star Wars.
Interpreted. And it's funny because I remember struggling over this specific section, but I was trying to say interpret and interpreted, but I came out with interpreted. The public education system sucks. Fuck.
Star Wars movie. Surprisingly, this negative reaction towards the movie led to a now large part of the fandom 20 years later. The Phantom Edit caught the interest of the internet. Fans began to edit the Star Wars films, telling the stories in new ways, and some would argue the edits improved the movies.
If any of you have actually seen the Phantom edit and you know how to send it to me, send it to me. Please, please send it to me. Commando 66 says, wasn't Kevin Smith a shill for the Phantom Menace? I don't know if he was at the time, but he definitely, I guess you could say, became a prequel shill as like later on. I think Kevin Smith just started playing things safe when it came to nerd culture. I'm not a fan of him, but I don't hate him either.
Other films have also received fan edits of their own. Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies have popular fan edits.
The Hobbit edit is really good.
By its fans
the Tolkien edit one.
The Matrix trilogy, the Avengers, and Marvel movies, Harry Potter, Batman, and even Spider-Man 3. All of these fan edits could be considered a product of the Phantom edit. Would fan edits exist if the Phantom Menace was never released? Did the negative reception towards Episode 1 become one of the main reasons fan edits became popular? It would be hard to deny the film's influence.
Yeah, it was very, very
fans
popular.
Could have a continued participatory relationship with the Star Wars franchise in any other film in the future.
That's true. They also wouldn't want to spoil anything.
Of fans from the films that don't like comic sidekicks. They want the films to be tough and like Terminator, and they want to be, real guy movies. And they get very, very upset and very opinionated about anything that has anything to do with being childlike.
It's funny that he says this because it's really applicable to today.
Which the movies are for children, but they don't want to admit that. And or a comic sidekick. They don't want comedy in these movies.
George Lucas was well aware of the negative reaction towards the film. Lucas spoke out against the claims of racism. When George Lucas was speaking to a group of college film students in the year 2000, he talked more about the critics calling his film racist. He was quoted as saying, "You can't sell newspapers by saying nice things about something. You can only sell newspapers by creating controversies. Critics aren't creators, they're destroyers. And I don't think any creative person will ever argue with me about that."
Okay, so I do want to give a side note. What happened here, I thought this was an interesting story. Lucas was giving a speech at a college, and this girl stood up. He was giving a speech, and I think it was about anthropology. And if you don't know, George Lucas is really into anthropology. This is what he was going to, I think, study before he went into film at USC. So when he was giving the speech, a girl stood up and said, "Mr. Lucas, do you find it," like, she was basically asking about critics. She's like, "What do you have to say to people calling your film Phantom Menace racist?" This was back in 2001. So right before Attack of the Clones came out. I think he was probably in post-production for it or something. I can't remember the specifics, but still, she asked him, "Hey, like, despite your work in anthropology and what you've done for society and whatnot, do you find it odd that critics found your movie, The Phantom Menace, racist?" And that's where he came out with this quote right here. And then after that speech was over, he brought the girl, kind of backstage or whatever when the class was over. And he talked to her afterwards. And this kind of shocked me. And I'm not going to say like brought my respect for Lucas down, but made me go, "Damn, George, I think you took it the wrong way." He told the girl, he was like, "Hey, I was really hurt by what you said." Like he was upset with her asking that question. And I think that a large part of that, of course, is because Lucas was not on the internet post 2001, probably 2000 as well. But Lucas really does not like being called racist. And rightfully so. No one does. But Lucas is someone who very much prided himself on being someone who wasn't intolerant, looked at everyone equally. And I think we can all agree with that at this stage. But people were upset with him for not including enough black people in the original trilogy. And then when you have the Phantom Menace, people go, "Oh, now you're racist." It was likely extremely upsetting for him. Maybe she didn't ask at the right time. I don't know how social cues were back in the early 2000s, but I imagine this, I'm not going to imagine, he quite clearly was upset with that question from that girl. And I just found that kind of shocking.
So what went wrong? That became the question for Star Wars fans. Why was The Phantom Menace a disappointment to those who waited 16 years for the next installment in this epic space adventure? It's a common practice for Star Wars fans to talk about the films and debate them. But The Phantom Menace was not like the other three films in the saga. Fans began to question the merits of the film and wondered how the franchise went from magic to disappointment.
Peruska?
Cut. Let's try it again.
Did The Phantom Menace fail as a film, or were the expectations simply too high to reach? Lucas argues that the expectations were impossible for any movie to reach. The critics of Lucas and his newest Star Wars film would argue the film is simply bad. Those who are more familiar with Star Wars say that George no longer cared about the story in the films, but only the toy sales that Star Wars can bring. Gary Kurtz produced the first Star Wars film.
This is what Gary
and
Kurtz
Empire
talks about
Strikes
right here,
Back,
this
and
comment.
his legacy in Star Wars has gone unnoticed by most fans, but film critics and fans who study Star Wars credit him as one of the fathers of the franchise. Kurtz did not work on Return of the Jedi, which critics noted the movie clearly had a lighter tone, and was more toy-driven compared to the other movies in the original trilogy.
I thought he should have died in the last one, just to give it some bottom, some...
Did that not go over well
gravitas.
with George Lucas?
George didn't think there was any future in dead Han toys.
Did Gary Kurtz predict the newfound focus in Star Wars? He stated in an interview about his departure from the franchise, "I could see where things were headed. The toy business began
no,
to
I
drive
haven't
the
seen that
Lucasfilm
yet.
empire. It's a shame. They make 3 times as much on those toys as they do on films. It's natural to make decisions that protect the toy business, but that's not the best thing for making quality films."
You weren't there at the beginning. You don't know how good it was, how important. This is it for you. This jumped up firework display of a toy advert. People like you make me sick.
You know what's so funny about that is how big of a critic he was. What's his name? Simon Pegg. He was a big critic, of course, of the prequel trilogy, and then lo and behold, he becomes a consultant for future Star Wars movies, starting with The Force Awakens. I think that's because of his relationship with J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot Company and whatnot. But the fact that, like, it's just kind of funny to me that he really did not like the Star Wars movies from the prequels and everything. Then he gets to work on the sequels, which were kind of a referendum on the prequels in a sense, at least if J.J. was working on it. Kind of a poetic irony.
What's wrong with you?
A common critique of The Phantom Menace is its merchandising focus instead of story. Was this purposeful by Lucas? Was Star Wars now profit-driven?
Oh,
A counter
George,
argument
look at
would
him
be that
go.
Lucas was simply meeting the fans' demand for Star Wars toys. It became a part of the Star Wars experience, and fans loved the toys. No one said they had to buy the toys, but fans, of course, did.
Yeah, this is the thing that a lot of people didn't like about the Phantom Menace is that 9-year-old Anakin is the main character, and that's one thing I've argued too. I'm like, you have the biggest badass in the galaxy, and you're telling me I got to see him as a 9-year-old brat. I'm okay.
The difficult part is to not go too far, just go strange enough. Yeah. That's the biggest trap people fall into in these
He fell into his own trap.
kinds of movies. Is they go too far.
Sadly, some of the actors in The Phantom Menace were negatively impacted from the backlash towards the film. Jake Lloyd played young Anakin Skywalker. Critics and fans alike panned Jake's acting in Episode 1. Jake retired from acting a few years after The Phantom Menace was released. Jake was bullied in school for his role in Star Wars. He said kids would make lightsaber noise and tease him non-stop.
They wouldn't let it go, so you know how they can be in high school. They're so charming and intelligent.
I always feel bad for Jake. No, I mean, who doesn't? But what I feel bad more is that people kind of use him as like a defense of the prequels of like, oh, they're not bad. You guys remember how awful Jake Lloyd was treated? It's like, yeah, he was treated awfully, but a lot of that hate didn't come from Star Wars fans. He was too young to like, what the fuck are you gonna do? Go hit the kid's address up? Back in 1999, you're like, oh, hey, how old is Jake Lloyd? Oh, is he like 11 or 12? Let me drive by the brat's house and say, hey, fuck you for ruining Star Wars. No, people were upset with George Lucas. Kids, like he just said he said high school, kids were awful to fucking Jake Lloyd. They were absolutely brutal to the guy. He had a lot of negative attention. I feel really bad for him. He's done interviews where he said that, he's not fond of cameras anymore. I don't know a lot about his story and situation because enough of that's already public, unfortunately. He has schizophrenia. He's right now I think he moved from a psychiatric facility to somewhere else, something better for his family. But I know I could reach out to people who know him and learn more about him and all that stuff. But sometimes don't you ever hear about these kind of stories and you just go, man, wouldn't the best thing to do is just leave him the fuck alone? Just let him live his life. Like it's one of those things. Like despite if I don't like someone, I hear something like this happen to him. It's like, hey, I'm sorry. Like that's you don't wish that on your worst enemy.
Awesome people.
Jake was the center of a highly criticized movie. This led to his disdain for having the cameras pointed at him.
When you have something like that, there's a lot of expectations for it to meet the standards of an older public, and I don't think George did that.
The stories were meant for kids. I mean, have you met a kid who really hates Jar Jar Binks?
You can see how he had some wittiness to him. There's parts of the interview I cut, but one of them things he says, they ask like, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "I do freelance editing and whatnot." They're like, "Well, what do you want to do in college and everything?" And he's like, "The unaimed arrow never misses." And I remember hearing that like at a young age in my teenage years, and pretty much close to him at that time, and just thinking like, he reminds me a little bit of me, but like he's smart. Like he can articulate his thoughts very well, and he's very self-aware. And I find that very respectable in anybody, because I feel like that's something a lot of people lack today, maybe myself included. But the fact that he was that self-aware, that he was like, you know what, I don't get a lot of money from Star Wars, I'm using it to pay for my college. He just kind of used that to get a decent head start in life, but not enough where, it's more than people I guess you would know in your life who had rich parents. He worked for his money. And I think if he could go back and not do Star Wars, he probably wouldn't do it. But then again, he also said he loved the memories of making the movie and dealing with the people who were making it. So it's just sad. But now let's get into the story about Ahmed Best. Before I get to that, go to a few questions. Or Stephanie says the first prequel should have started with the Attack of the Clones story and placement wise, and I actually agree with that. I feel like the Phantom Menace almost feels like a spinoff movie if you watch it in order, and then the second movie should have been just the Clone Wars. 110% right. We would have lost the show, but that still would have been cool. And then keep Revenge of the Sith as the third. I have absolutely no problem with that. That maybe in hindsight people wouldn't want that, but in terms of narrative and making Star Wars the best possible story it could be, I would prefer this route.
Star Wars was Ahmed's first major film. Sadly, the role did not give him the breakthrough career people would expect from starring in Star Wars. Though Ahmed does not regret the role of Jar Jar, the disdain people had for his character negatively impacted his life. Fans that were upset with the Phantom Menace and Jar Jar would send Ahmed death threats and messages saying he ruined their childhood. It's doubtful that one movie could ruin a fan's childhood, but it's also doubtful that Ahmed is to blame for his character's bad perception. A big criticism of the Phantom Menace was the character Jar Jar and his forced humor, or lack thereof.
Oh, he's gonna step in the poopy.
Jar Jar was shown less and less, but when he first appears in the Attack of the Clones film, you can see the Gungan wink at the camera. The working title for Episode 2 was originally Jar Jar's Adventure. This was all George Lucas showing his unique sense of humor to the fans.
That's great.
It's going to be great.
That's going to be great. That's going to be great.
Episodes 2 and 3
like
came
that.
out years later,
Like, yes, I
wrapping up
remember
the
that.
Star Wars prequel trilogy. The prequels were not the movies fans had hoped for. Was it the rough start of the Phantom Menace, or was it the older fans who didn't understand George Lucas and his vision for Star Wars?
Jar Jar is a key to all this.
Lucas wrote and directed all three of the Star Wars prequels.
Oh man, all right, that last minute of like just the documentary, it kind of like goes from a consistent storytelling to me just kind of, I don't know, jumping point to point and weird.
Because of this, fans could easily point and
It's gonna
blame
be
him for
great.
the failure of the Phantom Menace. Lucas offers many rebuttals to this. A commonly debated one is the films were meant for kids.
You know, it's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this, and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but, you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
There may be some holes in that argument, but
Why did I say that? It's like I made this and like almost kind of wanted to rebuttal Lucas in a sense. We're like, there may be some holes in that argument, but I didn't really address the holes in the argument. That was kind of a weak move by me, but whatever you had to say, young Star Wars only.
Star Wars has always captured the innocence of childhood in us all. The Phantom Menace did not capture the childlike wonder in the adults who watched the film. But George Lucas and many others believe the Phantom Menace did its job with the children who watched it. The kids could have found no faults with Jar Jar, and loved seeing the newest Star Wars film. Maybe George really did make a movie for kids, but critics argue that the kids could care less about the abundance of politics.
That's another thing. I said the kids could care less about the abundance of politics. It should be the kids couldn't care less. Another mistake I always get. Let's see, what was there was a comment I wanted to see. Oh yeah, Crawling Chaos. Would have been interesting seeing Spielberg having done a prequel. I agree. I think he would have done a lot better than George, and I think we would have had a very interesting Star Wars movie. Charlie, big shout out to him, says Star Wars only. I don't know what the fuck your problem is. Do I have that as like an audio clip? I don't. I don't even have my old OG one. That sucks. Anyways, thank you for that, though. I always like when people say that. It means a lot. Anyways, let's keep going on with this beautiful story. And watch along, Charlie. Watch along. It's my good old documentary.
Politics that the Phantom Menace focuses heavily on. Fans have wondered how George would create a masterpiece with the original trilogy, But yet The Phantom Menace was a Star Wars film that received more negative feedback than any other film in the franchise, excluding the holiday special. But why was this? Lucas was returning to the director's chair after a 20-year-long hiatus from directing, but this was not by choice. Ron Howard revealed in a 2015 interview that he was approached by George Lucas to direct the prequels. Lucas also offered the job to directors Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis. All three of these legendary and famed directors turned down the offer and told Lucas it was his child and he should be the one to direct the films. Ron Howard said Lucas didn't necessarily want to direct the prequels. Perhaps Lucas had no other choice but to direct the films himself. Ironically, Ron Howard eventually directed a Star Wars film almost 20 years after Lucas offered him the director's chair. It's fun for Star Wars fans.
I really wonder how different the prequels would have been if Lucas had only stayed on as a writer and let his friends direct his movies. There's a video called, you guys remember that song from, I forget what the band's called, but it's called Somebody That I Used to Know. Well, there was a parody version made with George Lucas and Anakin, and basically about the wedge between George Lucas and the Star Wars fans. And the guy says, have your friends direct your movies and maybe it'll turn out better, as like a kind of dig. And it was, it's funny. A lot of people felt that way. Also, what's up with my bad Photoshop job? You see the fucking George Lucas on the right? Oh, God. I need to improve a lot. It's just because I've been doing all of this on a shitty laptop. The same laptop I made this documentary on, I'm using this right now. I just want you guys to know that, all right? We're behind. You know, don't think your boy Star Wars Only is raking in dough. I got about fucking, I was going to say how much money I had in my bank account, but it'd be embarrassingly low. You guys would be like, really?
How episodes 7 through 9
That's
would
it?
have been like if George Lucas had made them. But we also wonder what the Star Wars prequels could have been if George Lucas brought in one of those three legendary filmmakers who have created some of cinema's greatest films, notably alongside Mr. Lucas himself.
I think I said Robert. I want to say Zemeckis, but I'm scared I even said that wrong. But anyways, apparently I said it wrong in the documentary too. This is an interesting conversation between George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, and big shout out to Charlie Spur. Thumbs way down. I think deserve a public apology for Star Wars Only. That's a good one. See, if you guys could ever that's what I love about like just Star Wars culture in general, or even some people who watch this channel. Shout out to Charlie. Is if you guys can get me like a funny meme that like you have to be there to get it, or like you have to like have a deep meta understanding of Star Wars. That's kind of my humor. Like if you guys come at me with some bullshit like that, it's just perfect. It's if anyone ever sees me at Celebration and you don't even know who I'm Star Wars Only, but like I didn't tell you that, and you just recognize my face even though you've never seen it. And if you walk up and you're like, hey, I think you may have gone too far in a few places, or walk away, or you say it's going to be great and then walk away, like I would never need to talk to you again, but I want you to know I'm going to think about you every day for the rest of my life.
Question. Were you seriously thinking of not directing Star Wars?
Which, this one?
When we were all saying, oh, George, you got to direct it yourself. And you, oh, I don't know.
No, I was always...
Dressing room, I got $50. Does that make you feel better? I probably have like maybe $5 more than you in my bank account right now. Maybe.
Gonna come back.
Well, how come you put us all through that?
Because I'd like to torture you guys.
You were always going to direct it.
Well, I didn't know whether I was always going to direct it. I mean, it really depends on where I was, and I wanted to come back and direct. I didn't, You
mean we're talking about the
one
coming out? For a long time, he was saying he didn't know that he was going to direct it. All of his friends were saying, "Oh, you got to direct it. You must do it yourself." Blah blah blah.
I got a lot of attention.
I actually, I'm going to admit something that I think is probably a little bit more of a revelation of like my insecurity, I guess, at the time of making this. Part of me wanted to cut that part of the documentary out. Part of me wanted to cut that conversation short where George Lucas says, like, I was always going to come back and direct it. And I'm not saying I was going to do it to instill a narrative, but part of me thought if I cut it, it wouldn't mean anything. But then another part of me thought if I did cut it, it would kind of build a narrative that George didn't want to direct the prequels, and he only directed it because nobody else wanted to direct them, which isn't the case. Other people were fine directing it, but they all said, George, you got to do it. It's not like George didn't want to do it. He clearly did want to direct it. But for some reason, I thought if I cut that out, it would show, like, it would be a different kind of message and that people take away. And that, I don't know, that kind of scared me because I was like, why am I thinking about spreading like misinformation? That was like a thought of like, oh, wow, like that's how easy people can get manipulated into something that's false. And so in hindsight, I'm very proud of keeping that in. But like, I just remember thinking at the time, like, wow, this could be a very selfish move to do of taking that part out and making people think something that's absolutely not true. It's hard to explain, but you'll understand this if you make anything news based.
In 2005, Revenge of the Sith was released. This was the final installment of the prequel trilogy. Lucas had predicted after Episode 1 that fans would hate Attack of the Clones because of its love story, and Episode 3 mostly due to its darker tone. He was right about Attack of the Clones.
Charlie, you should just invest your money in stocks. Every check, just put some in stocks,
of the prequel
and then
trilogy,
thank me in 20 years.
presumably
Never
the Star Wars
sell.
saga, the Phantom Menace faded into history. One of
How would I rank the prequels? At the top of the list, from best to worst. Best is Revenge of the Sith. Middle one is Middle one is the Phantom Menace. The worst of them all is Attack of the Clones.
if not the most common critique of the Star Wars prequels, is their over-reliance of CGI. Lucas was the first director to use digital cameras instead of filming with a standard film. Jar Jar being the first fully digital character led to iconic digital characters like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean, and many other digital characters in the past 20 years of cinema. While The Phantom Menace may have not been the film loved by all, its impact on cinema and its use of digital technology changed how films were made. Sadly, this historical change in how we create modern-day movies has never been linked to George Lucas and his innovative mindset when creating the prequel films. The poor fan reaction to the prequels, and specifically The Phantom Menace, overshadowed the extraordinary impact it had on cinema.
That is one thing that always frustrated me with prequel fans, is that they talked about the beauty of the prequels, all that, but they never talked about how George Lucas revolutionized the film industry again. And it's only within the past year I have oddly noticed people starting to talk about that more. People starting to talk about how George Lucas, did an amazing job with that digital technology back then. I'm not saying it's a coincidence. Like, people watched this documentary. It's got about 1.6 million views. So that's not enough to engulf the entire Star Wars fandom and have an influence of narrative. But I'm just saying it is kind of good timing and irony that I make this documentary and then only like 2 years later, or maybe even a year and a half later, do people finally start talking about how revolutionary the prequels actually were. And that's slightly annoying, but also kind of a good sign, because it's like, all right, we're all becoming a more educated fandom, but you want education in the right sense. You don't want to be like the guys who are like, well, people don't realize that the prequels revolutionized the film industry with the technology, and that's why they're so great. It's like, no, that's not why they're great. That's just why they're revolutionary. You can be revolutionary, but still be a bad movie. Oh, no. Oh, fuck me. I played it back. Oh, God. We lost our spots. So sorry. Oh, no. It's all right. I'll find it real easy.
Instead of filming with a standard
film. Yeah, we're back where we...
Jar Jar being the first fully digital
lost
character
it all. So sorry.
led to iconic digital characters like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, Davy Jones from Pirates
Solo
of the
was
Caribbean,
fun. Yeah, a lot of people
and
like
many
Solo.
other digital characters in the past 20 years of cinema. While The Phantom Menace may have not been the film loved by all, its impact on cinema and its use of digital technology changed how films were made. Sadly, this historical change in how we create modern-day movies has never been linked to George Lucas.
Yeah, the
and his
CGI
innovative
in the prequels are
mindset
far
when
better
creating
than
the
special
prequel
editions.
films.
I mean, light
The
years.
poor
light
fan
years.
reaction to the prequels, and specifically The Phantom Menace, overshadowed the extraordinary impact it had on cinema.
Painful, it's scary, and a lot of things, and you need somebody there to hold your hand and say, look, I'll take the blame. If this doesn't work, I take the blame.
That's a very good point.
That's why I've always done it on my own movies.
I remember meeting Liam Neeson after he'd done one of the Star Wars movies, and he went, Robin, I don't know anymore. I really don't want to act.
Everybody press F in the chat for Robin Williams.
I think because I've just spent time looking at an X. I don't know what it's about anymore. Really, I've trained to do lots of amazing things, but now I've just been looking at an X for a long time. And if I saw him, I went, oh no, they've gotten poor Liam. Dear God. Dear God.
The fans of Star Wars
Yeah,
have always
Liam
been
Neeson was
major
actually...
key to the success
What the
of the
fuck?
franchise. These
I got
fans
some
showed
bulb
their
in my
passion for
backyard,
the
apparently.
creative
Oh, there's
way.
that. There's
It
the
became very
fucking
apparent
thing.
nearly-
It went away. Fucking A. There we go. Hand. We're gonna mute this and play it. But that was what I was talking about. That's the clip from that song I was telling you guys about. Look it up. It's like somebody that I used to know, Star Wars parody. These guys are using it as like Darth Vader and George Lucas having a falling out, and Darth Vader being the Star Wars fans. Very, very funny.
Nearly 10 years after The Phantom Menace, in 2009,
Very
a movie
true.
called
They like
Fanboys
practical
was
effects.
released. The story is about a group of Star Wars fans in 1998 who travel across America in order to sneak into Skywalker Ranch and see an early viewing of Episode 1. Fanboys was made to pay homage to the Star Wars fans of the late 90s, and Star Wars fans in general. The biggest critique for the film would be that if you aren't a fan of Star Wars, you likely will not enjoy this movie. But even George Lucas gave this film his seal of approval, even allowing the film to use the original sound effects from Star Wars. The film is a fun watch for any Star Wars fan, and can give the modern day fan a sense of the fandom 20 years ago. Fanboys ends with a group of friends attending the midnight release for The Phantom Menace. The last words of the film were,
Hey you guys, what if movie sucks?
The fact that George Lucas saw this movie and was like completely cool with him having that. Also, if you guys notice, the third guy on your left is Roy from The Office. He played the main character's big brother, I think, in this movie. It's a really good movie. It's funny, it's fun, it's niche, it's nerdy, it's definitely 90s, but it's good. There's a comment I wanted to get to. 4K versions of the prequel movies, that they make the CGI worse. So it's not an actual 4K. That's what sucks. Like, if prequel fans who are like, oh, it was great that they filmed it digitally, they're also never going to get an actual true 4K Star Wars movie, because when you film something digitally and you make it into 4K, it's not native 4K. It's upscaled. So when you film, and that's because at the time they were filmed on probably 1080p cameras or something like that. Great for the time, but it doesn't age like a fine wine. That's why it's better to film on film cameras like we did it with the original trilogy, because when you watch the original trilogy, another way to look at this is when you film on film cameras, film itself, the film that the strips of film that you see that they use in editing rooms back in the 70s and all that stuff, that is actually a lot closer to 4K than you would think. It's already like at a very high frame rate. So when you have those movies, when you have actual film movies, you can get 4K releases of them. You can't do that on a digital movie like Attack of the Clones, like Revenge of the Sith. We could get an actual 4K Phantom Menace because it was filmed on film, but it also was upscaled. Well, not upscaled. Like I said earlier, it's all every single scene has a digital effect to it. So I'm not sure how that would result, but yeah, it doesn't make the CGI look better. That's for sure. Some of the stuff becomes a little more glaring over time.
2 years later, a more controversial Star Wars.
Oh yeah, my boy, the people versus George Lucas. No, they don't like practical effects. The Phantom Menace had more practical effects models / backgrounds than the entire original trilogy combined. All right, Charlie, I love you, but you guys as prequel fans use that argument way too much, and no offense, it means absolutely nothing. The budget for the Phantom Menace was more than, I think, all three of the budgets for the original trilogy combined. So, like you're saying, no offense to you specifically, Charlie, but I'm just saying as prequel fans, you guys use that as an argument when it's kind of like oh, no shit. That's like saying, oh, did you know that The Force Awakens used more special effects than all three movies of the prequel trilogy combined? It's like, well, yeah, no shit. It's been 10 years. An entire generation has passed. Yeah, I expect them to use more practical effects, models, and backgrounds than the entire original trilogy combined. The budget is huge. You just made hundreds of millions of dollars. You have a $150 million budget as opposed to a $50 million budget. You sure as fuck better have more shit. Where else is that money going to go, Charlie? So yeah, you're right. You're right. As a matter of fact, you are right. But I think you're wrong in the sense that this is going to be like, oh, therefore it's better than the original trilogy. They didn't use it. Like I've said, every single shot except for one in The Phantom Menace was digitally enhanced. You cannot say the same for the original trilogy. And that's where things become too much. If you use a lot of practical effects, if you use a lot of practical sets, it's going to look very real. But when you use a lot of digital stuff, you get the prequels. And to some people, including myself, it just doesn't look real. So just because they have a lot more models, they have more practical effects than all the other movies combined, doesn't mean there's an overabundance of digital stuff in there as well.
The People vs.
Or doesn't mean there
George
isn't
Lucas,
one.
a documentary that covers the culture behind the fandom of Star Wars, but also covers the problems fans had with George Lucas over the years. It has been remembered as a controversial documentary in the Star Wars fandom. The title alone makes fans feel like the premise of the film is to attack Lucas and all his faults. In the film, fans and celebrities alike talk about the lead up to the Star Wars prequels and the reaction to The Phantom Menace in 1999. It also covers at length the frustration fans have with George Lucas's refusal to release the original trilogy as it was seen in theaters. Instead, he opts for his controversial special editions. A common debate in this documentary as well is if the art belongs to the creator or the fan. The art in this case being Star Wars. This documentary perfectly captures the questions and debates amongst...
Shout out to my boy Dale Pollock right here. Love that guy. There was a question here I saw. Oh, Lord Vader says, someone needs to take... has there ever been a time where you had an opportunity to meet George, but you didn't meet him? No. Maybe when I was in Chicago, he could have been in the area, but I doubt it. I know people close to George. Talked to I think 2 or 3 people who like know him on a personal level, but I've never had an opportunity to like meet him or something like that. George does not like attention. That's why I don't think he would really be willing to give any Star Wars YouTuber, any Star Wars channel page, you name it, like just in general, anybody at this point, an interview, unless it's someone big like Charlie Rose, like someone he's interviewed with multiple times in the past and that he's comfortable with. George doesn't like the limelight. He wants to be left the fuck alone. And mainly with Star Wars now, there's not a lot. Like, I'm assuming someone like me or maybe even other Star Wars channels who would want to interview him, people are going to try to ask him things about the sequels, to be like, oh, what do you really think about Kathleen Kennedy? What do you got to say about her, George? And he's going to be like, Kathleen Kennedy and me have been friends for probably 40 odd years. She's one of my dearest friends. I love her to death. And I think she's the best choice to run Star Wars after me. So people wouldn't get the answers they'd want to. They'd be surprised that George Lucas isn't as fucking stupid as the rest of us, but also that George just doesn't like talking about this stuff anymore. He likes being left alone. He likes having his own private life. And I have to respect that. If I ever met the man, I would talk to him and tell him how influential and how he changed my life, but I would try to have an honest to God conversation with him over trying to have an interview with him. That would be enough for me to, have a happy note in my life. If I could shake the man's hand, I'd be happy.
Star Wars fans that they still have to this day. One can wonder if Lucas has ever seen the documentary. If he hasn't seen it, he is well aware of its existence. David Prowse, the actor who played Darth Vader in the original trilogy, was featured in the documentary, and has not been allowed to a Star Wars
I think we
since
put that part in this documentary too.
People vs. George Lucas mostly shows the build-up to Episode 1 and the reaction of the audiences and fans. If there is
That is very true. George Lucas is very insecure about the theatrical cuts of the original trilogy. That is one of the few things I think he has no ground on, really. Special edition CGI versus prequel trilogy CGI. Oh, prequel trilogy CGI by landslide. I mean, it did, like we said, it did revolutionize the industry, so it did something right. The question would be Jurassic Park CGI versus prequel CGI. Ooh, which one do you guys think is better in that? Also, is Disney's too lazy to release the theatrical cuts of the OT. Funny thing about that, Disney yet again has no say about that. People are surprised with how many things that are different in terms of power structure with Disney and Lucasfilm and Star Wars. George Lucas is still, yet again, the only person who has the power to release the original theatrical cuts. To this day, that only lies on his shoulders.
Any curiosity as to why the fans that grew up with the original films felt like The Phantom Menace was a step backwards, this fan film shows just that.
A million lives.
I almost got hornswoggled in that documentary where they weren't calling it The People versus George Lucas at the time, but I could tell from the questions they were asking me, it was an open invitation to trash George. And I have issues with George, but I love that man. I would never, and I don't talk outside the family.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that some people who were interviewed by the People versus George Lucas stuff, I don't like the fact that it doesn't seem like they were misleading Mark, but yeah, I understand what he's talking about of like, it seemed like an open invitation. I really wonder how far in the questions they got before Mark walked out. Like, if I could see the footage of that, I would really like to. Alexander Felipe is the guy who directed The People versus George Lucas. I actually do respect him a lot, and I should reach out to him and probably have him on the channel or something like that. Do a Tatooine thing. Nam's reference in a Star Wars only video. He actually commented on this video a very long time ago. I think he deleted the comment, and I surprisingly saved it. I found it on in my documents from like a month ago. I was like, oh, I have I think I screenshotted what Anomaly commented because I thought it was really stupid at the time, and I had a feeling he was going to delete it. And lo and behold, he did delete the comment. So that was a funny interaction we had on the well, not interaction. That was a funny situation that we had on this this specific video.
Fans of the original films had to wait over 15 years for a new Star Wars film. Episode 1 was meant to bring Star Wars back. Was The Phantom Menace really the best Lucas had to offer? The People versus George Lucas.
That is something I want all prequel fans to answer, and just let me know if they do. You can answer this as well, Charlie, if you're listening, because I know you love the prequels, and that's completely fine. But I do want to know from you guys: do you truly think the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones? Maybe I would leave Revenge of the Sith out of this because people would say that's the best he has to offer. But do you really think the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones are the absolute best George Lucas could have done with the prequels? I would like to know if you guys think that, because I think he could have done better.
This is about the problems that fans had with the creator of Star Wars. What are the problems that fans actually had with the film? What are the problems people had with The Phantom Menace? There are plenty of reviews on YouTube by Star Wars fans that can explain the complex feelings for The Phantom Menace, but none of them have reached the popularity of the Mr. Plinkett reviews of The Phantom Menace.
Star Wars The Phantom Menace was the most disappointing thing since my son. I mean, how much more could you possibly fuck?
All right, well, I appreciate your honesty, Charlie. I really appreciate the honesty on that. I do think he's surrounded himself with the yes-men. That's something that even Gary Kurtz, the former producer for Star Wars, does say. Let's see what Pluto has to say. I love all the passion Lucas puts into the Phantom Menace without nobody getting in the way. It has flaws, but that's why I appreciate George's vision as an artist. Yeah, it's very what do they call it? Auteur theory is, letting the original creator have as much freedom as they want. And that's what we have here. This definitely is George Lucas's vision. It's just not everyone's vision that made Star Wars. It's very unique. But yeah, I guess Charlie, it could be up to debate on if that's the best he could give us.
Up the entire backstory to Star Wars.
Made by the channel Red Letter Media, the Mr. Plinkett reviews are perhaps the best summarization of the problem fans had with the film. Originally released in 2009, the Mr. Plinkett Phantom Menace reviews quickly rose.
The Plinkett reviews are very funny. Even if you don't like them, they're really funny.
Of the infamous movie. The character Mr.
I don't really like the
spent
hooker
70
stuff,
minutes
though. That
analyzing
stuff's
the
annoying.
Phantom Menace.
Takes
He
up too
talks
much
at
time.
length about the problems within the film. Plinkett covers the poor plot structure of the movie, bad characters.
That's another thing that the Plinkett reviews all of us have on any movie, is that we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look back, and as someone who wasn't there even around for the 90s, I can go, oh, well, the prequels suck because of this and that. But honest to God, if you took me back then and you say, okay, fine. All right, you talk so much shit about the prequels. Here you go, motherfucker. Here's a pen, a pad. I'm going to give you $1 billion. You go make the Star Wars prequels, and let's see how you do. It would be 110 times worse than what George Lucas did. I wouldn't know what the fuck to do because I don't have that kind of creative imagination in my body. And I respect the man for doing it. Like, it's Sam Witwer, I think, made a great point about that. There was a clip of him going around on a Star Wars Theories podcast from years ago where he said there takes no talent to criticize a movie. It takes no talent to say the Phantom Menace sucks and break down why it sucks. Because when we look at it through a movie, we're like, oh, I see the flaws. But when you're making it, you can't see that. So it's a very good point. Hindsight is a bitch.
Lack of clear protagonists, and the movie having 4 different story endings. This review has inspired many other videographic film criticism channels, and videos all across the web. After this, Star Wars fans began to point to the Plinkett reviews for the best explanation as to why they were disappointed with The Phantom Menace. The reviews became an internet legend, and the gold standard for film analyzing on YouTube. Mr. Plinkett blamed the failures of The Phantom Menace not only on Lucas, but on those around him who worked on the film. A common criticism of The Phantom Menace is that George Lucas had too much control of the film.
I take it you say action after we roll camera?
I'll say action.
You don't.
Sometimes I forget.
People forget.
That is such an awkward interaction, and you're never going to tell me it's not.
If I forget to say action or cut, just step in and say action and cut.
Which is actually what Lucas preferred. George Lucas has never been the common Hollywood director. If you study the work of George Lucas, you will begin to understand how his creative control impacted the film. Lucas both wrote and directed The Phantom Menace, and anyone who has studied Lucas will know that he's not the best writer. Lucas himself admits this, and he doesn't consider himself to be the best director either.
Yeah, that's another thing I don't understand is how so many people think like George Lucas is this amazing writer and director when he himself has said, if I make a movie the way I want to make it, I think of the story, and then I have Larry Kasdan write it, and then I have Steven Spielberg direct it. He doesn't want to direct a lot of movies. That's not his thing. He's an editor. He's a producer. He's great at those. He's great at the technological side of stuff. He doesn't want to direct and write all his movies. The only reason he even writes movies is because Francis Ford Coppola forced him, literally forced him to. He said, George, you're going to write a movie because if you don't learn how to write movies, you can't fucking direct them.
The shortcomings in the writing of George Lucas have always been the characters
Have a good day,
and the
buddy. Thank you for
dialogue,
joining.
something even modern-day Star Wars fans commonly acknowledge. Today, fans believe The Phantom Menace would have been a better film if George had not written the script. And perhaps they're right. Lucas seems to focus all his attention on the special effects and looks of The Phantom Menace, instead of the story. Was The Phantom Menace hindered by its creator's complete creative control? That's what seems to be the common takeaway from fans and critics
he
alike.
is the king
Some,
of
like
wooden
Mr.
dialogue.
Plinkett, blamed those around Lucas during the creation of The Phantom Menace for not challenging him on some of his decisions. When watching the behind-the-scenes documentary, you can see some people aren't entirely comfortable with challenging Lucas creatively. You can see here everyone is mostly silent and offers no input for Lucas over the casting of Anakin Skywalker. But once he left the room, everyone gave their thoughts over the casting choices.
Because he seems more natural. I like his body language.
It's just not true.
Yeah, so let's look at this image here. So the top left, we have Jake Lloyd, and the bottom left, we have this other actor for Anakin. And if you actually watched the documentary for The Phantom Menace, not this one, but the one that was released for the movie, you see both of them doing like their acting auditions, and it is night and day that the kid in the bottom left is pretty good. Like it feels realistic. But George says he likes Jake Lloyd, and you even listen to the dialogue here. They're talking about how Jake's acting just isn't natural. But the comparison between the characters is that like Jake looks more like an older Luke Skywalker, and George just liked Jake. He just thought that Jake could pull out more emotion and stuff from certain scenes, and I disagree with him, but I mean, he's the one who cast it. But it is funny that to me this was one of the few times you could see in the documentary because, I mean, I guess you could see it multiple times, but this is one of the big points of like clearly no one wanted to say anything to George while he was there. We actually think the kid in the bottom left is doing a little bit better. But when George leaves, they're all like, "Oh yeah, it's not that like it's kind of funny."
And this one just hits the beats.
Yeah, I was gonna say some people audition real well.
Yeah, see, there you go. She said she points to the bottom left one, says this one just hits the beats. And when she talks about like it's unnatural, she said that before we paused. She was talking about Jake Lloyd, and then the other guy just commented as well. He said some people audition really well, and so I think he was talking about the boy in the bottom left of like, hey, he was really good at auditioning.
This is not the first time people on set felt the presence of George Lucas as intimidating when filming a Star Wars movie. During the filming of Return of the Jedi,
that's a good
Richard
point.
Marquand talked about the struggles of filming with Lucas around. He was quoted as saying it was like directing King Lear with Shakespeare in the next room. It may be hard to critique.
Now, to be fair, Richard Marquand, that is was the director for Return of the Jedi, wasn't the best director in the world. Some people thought he was hired because George could easily control him and push him around. I don't know if that's neither here nor there. That's a topic for another day. But Richard Marquand was not good at directing the special effects stuff. Like all that, George really did have to take a big part in Return of the Jedi. But even he wasn't happy with some of the results of that movie. So it's kind of funny that George really never got his full vision for a Star Wars movie, probably until The Phantom Menace. Shout out to Charlie Spur, always paying the bills around here. He says, I wrote a series that I have since lost, but if I ever write it again, I would never, ever bend the knee to the whim of the fans. If I had any, if it's between my vision for work versus the fans, I choose me. And I can respect that. And that's what I can always respect about George is that I feel like it's almost impossible to make something, listen to people's reactions, and then not make a reactionary response narratively to what they have to say. Like we'll look at The Rise of Skywalker. J.J. Abrams clearly took criticism from The Last Jedi into consideration for The Rise of Skywalker. George Lucas did the same thing with Jar Jar specifically in the prequels. That is the downfall of great art and great artists is listening to the critics and listening to the fans. Even critics can give you critiques and fans can give you praise, but if you listen to both of those, you're going to go insane. So very good point, Charlie, and I agree with you. That's why I don't really. If someone gives me praise and they're like, "Hey, I would change this about your channel," if you're rational and fair, it's like, okay, cool, I appreciate that. I'll put that under advisement. But if you're like, "Oh, your channel's absolute shit, fuck you, you should delete it," it's like, okay, you're clearly not only just a critic, but you're not adding any substance. You're not adding any actual criticism. You're just insulting me. So yeah, no, good point.
The man who created Star Wars while on set of the next
Now
Star
you can
Wars
still
film.
find it.
But film critics argue that George Lucas strives on adversity in collaboration with other creative minds. The original producer of Star Wars, Gary Kurtz, once said, "I think one of the problems Lucas has now, in the Lucasfilm empire, is the fact that he doesn't have more people around him who really challenge him." Kurtz was not a fan of The Phantom Menace. The writer of The Empire Strikes Back and now 2 other Star Wars films, Lawrence Kasdan, seemed to be taken aback from the film as well, stating once, "I was at the screening of The Phantom Menace, and it was just so different, and I really didn't know what to make of it. It had no connection in my mind to what we had done. Your eyes are just like, what? How does this work?" Even when Lucas originally saw The Phantom Menace, his reaction is quite telling.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
I love that. I love that one so much.
After the first rough cut screening, Lucas accurately predicts the reception of the movie.
But it is a very hard movie to follow, and at the same time, I've done it a little more extremely than I've ever done in the past. It's stylistically designed to be that way, and you can't undo that, but we can diminish the effects of it. We can slow it down a little bit so that if it's intense for us,
yeah, we don't know what
a regular person's going to go nuts.
In February,
if it's intense for us, a regular person is going to go nuts. Charlie says, criticism I will listen to, but saying your vision is better than my vision, tough shit, make your own work, and have a vision on that. Yeah, that's what Lucas was saying. Critics aren't creators, they're destroyers. They don't, if criticism only goes up to a certain point. But like you're saying, Charlie, if they're like, hey, you got to do my vision, you got to do it my way. It's like, no, I made this movie. I made this story. This is what, my name's on the front. It says written and directed by me, not you. So who the fuck do you think you are? Yeah, that's the approach Lucas has had for a while, and a lot of other directors like Quentin Tarantino have had as well.
Of 2012, The Phantom Menace returned to the big screen after being away for 13 years. Its return marked the beginning of a 3D re-release of the Star Wars saga. Each film was re-released in 3D at theaters every year until all 6 had been released. And the first film in the lineup was The Phantom Menace. With the name Star Wars attached to it, the re-released films would be a guaranteed financial success. The reception to the 3D version of the film fared far better compared to its original release in 1999. Fans were still disappointed with Episode 1, and the 3D re-release didn't seem to improve the film in any way, except for one scene that all fans agreed was greatly improved with the addition of 3D, which happened to be the pod race scene.
This Phantom Menace, motherfucker, is 3D! This motherfucker is empty!
If you could find that video of that guy just doing funny stuff, Samuel Jackson, it's really funny. I feel like this review may have gone too far. Phantom Menace 3D poster, yeah, they were interesting at that time. I will always respect George for doing things his way and pushing technology. What the fuck does OFC mean? Maybe I am old now. That also means that sometimes things don't go as planned, but I will always take style over super safe. Hang on, I gotta Google what OFC means real quick because I'm gonna feel real old if I don't. Of course. Oh, because OF and then C. Happy late birthday, Star Wars. Thank you very much. What video can I don't know. This is when you want to start with Fanboys. Don't start with the prequels. Yep. All right.
Later that same year, George Lucas would sell the rights of Star Wars to Disney.
I realized at some point I needed to retire, and I wanted to go on and do other things, things in philanthropy and doing more experimental kind of films, but I couldn't really drag my company into that.
Well, George, I want to see the philanthropy and the experimental shit. It's been damn near 10 years, buddy. All you've done is build a museum.
He was no longer in charge of the franchise. Fans wondered if the backlash towards the prequels, notably Episode 1, was the reason he never returned to direct and decided to sell the franchise.
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized.
Take that, Charlie. Guess what, Charlie? When we're going to be living in 2077, I'm going to be harping about how it's not like Star Wars 100 years ago. And then you're going to be talking about how it wasn't like Star Wars 70 to 80 years ago. We'll be doing this dance till we die, buddy. I promise.
And people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. It's not much fun. And you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way.
If that truly is the case, if Lucas sold Star Wars because of the backlash towards the prequels, the question can be asked.
Very good point. Very true. Isn't it?
Phantom Menace was a film everyone enjoyed. Would Lucas have kept the rights to the franchise? But as time passes, the stories of old become a part of history, and history is remembered differently by those who experienced it. It's accurate to say, the experience that the younger generation of Star Wars fans had with The Phantom Menace differs from the experience of the original trilogy fans. Older fans had their reasons for not liking the new film, but for an entire generation of fans, the prequels were the Star Wars movies that they grew up with. And the first one these kids were able to see in theater happened to be The Phantom Menace. The prequel trilogy.
So people are talking about now, George saying that he would do experimental films, and yeah, he has said that like, oh, you're not really going to see them, but when he says that, he kind of talks about like mainstream media. He talked about putting them in artisan form and whatnot. I mean, if he's going to make a movie, it has to be like an actual movie. I'd imagine someone would see it, but that's what we're all saying is like, hey, we want to do it. Why didn't George Lucas do any more films after Star Wars? I've seen interviews with George saying he wanted to go on and make more films. He's been busy raising his daughter. He's a very young daughter now. What is her name? Why do I always forget the name? His wife is a Melody. Everest. Her name is Everest. That's why I can't remember the name. It's fucking weird. Her name is Everest. It's pretty. Don't get me wrong. It's pretty, but unique name. Everest Hobson Lucas, I think. And the museum was not canceled due to environmental backlash. I think that was in Chicago. They moved it to Anaheim, I want to say. It's either Anaheim or LA, maybe even San Francisco. I think it's Anaheim. And it should be opening in 2022. I will be there. And yeah, he did do Strange Magic and Red Tails. That all that comes from Lucasfilm, Strange Magic and Red Tails. But some people, one guy was arguing with me on this today's video about Revenge of the Sith. He was saying that George Lucas directed Strange Magic or had a lot of involvement in Strange Magic. He made that for our young kids and everything, but all he did was write the story, and then he had like 3 other writers for the screenplay, but also the story that he wrote was like based off of another story. So it wasn't like an original story of his brain. But he didn't direct that. That came out after Lucasfilm was sold to Disney. It did not do very well. It wasn't received all that well. It's cute. I've heard it's really cute, and it's a fine movie, but it just wasn't a financial success, I don't think. But yeah, he did that, and he did Red Tails, which also was pretty bad movie and just bad timing. He said, oh, I was the first to do an all-black film. It's like, no, you weren't, George. No, the fuck you weren't. But he was ahead of the curve on Hollywood being more accepting to like black leads and all-black movies. It is kind of funny how he was ahead of the curve yet again on that, because if Red Tails came out today, I actually do think it would be very successful. I think people who are, and I don't mean this to be insulting, but people who are more left-leaning, actually it's not insulting, but it sounds like a compliment, but I'm not meaning it in that way. But people who are more left-leaning, people who are very into social justice warriors, the fact that it would be an all-black movie would be enough to get them on board. Whether it be a good movie or not is the question. And it wasn't, but he definitely was ahead with that. And yeah, Lucas did choose the music. Red Tails was horrible. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've just heard it was bad. I've seen some of the stuff. Just don't like it. And yeah, he produced Red Tails, and he definitely produced Strange Magic. In Red Tails, he directed some of the scenes because they had a lot of reshoots.
Is now given credit for its creation of a now beloved show in the Star Wars fandom, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The show takes place during the prequel era of Star Wars, after Episode 1 and 2, but before the third film. Clone Wars was created by Lucas and
documentary is almost over too. We're kind of getting
and
to
now
that.
that show has ran for 6 seasons, it's returning for its 7th season in 2019. Many fans believe this has helped improve the story of the prequel trilogy. For the kids who grew up with the Star Wars prequels, and years later were able to watch the Clone Wars show, build on those same stories and characters, the Star Wars prequels are films they enjoy and love. The creator of the Plinkett Reviews, Mike Stoklasa, once said in an interview about the prequel trilogy, "I just think that the prequels will evaporate from history, while the original films will remain relevant for a while to come."
And boy, how wrong was he.
The new films failed to create any iconic, memorable imagery, and it's all very forgettable. The fans may have proved him wrong. Over the past 5 years, fans have noticed the prequels have grown in popularity and appreciation. The Clone Wars brought back fan-favorite characters like Darth Maul from The Phantom Menace, and now the character has returned on the big screen with his appearance in Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Here's a good question. Lord Vader says, what did you think of that one clip that came out a month ago when George was asked, how does he feel about Star Wars now? And he said that Star Wars had gone but beyond what he intended. He said it's from October of 2020. I mean, that's really old. That's, I mean, I don't know. I think I know people were kind of like, oh, he was harping on Disney with that. I don't think he was. He was saying that like Star Wars is out of my control now, and that's just because he sold it. And he said something like the first 6 films are very much mine and my philosophy. That's not him like harping on Disney. That entire interview was on the premise of like social inequality among like the Black communities and impoverished areas, and talking about income inequality or whatever. Like he was talking about like philosophical stuff and like education. It wasn't an entire interview about. He was with his wife too. I think it was for like the Lucas Foundation, and it was an education thing. A bunch of kids sending questions. It wasn't really about like him trying to shit on the sequels or anything. It was just him saying that Star Wars is no longer something he has control over. So when he says it's gone beyond his control, he just means that I have no say on what the story is. But if you're looking at what my message is, episodes 1 through 6 are kind of they're the movies I made. So they really capture my philosophy in the best possible way. He's not saying that to shit on the sequels. He's just saying that, and that's another thing. People act like George like has come out and shat on the sequels or took shots. He even told Bob Iger that he's basically going to be a shill for him. Bob Iger thought about giving George Lucas a non-disparagement agreement, which basically means if you sign that, you cannot publicly and openly shit on a company. He was going to make George Lucas sign that for the deal with Disney to sell the company to Disney, sell Lucasfilm to Disney. And George told Bob, hey, I'm the biggest stockholder. I'm going to be one of the biggest stockholders of your company. Trust me, I'm not going to shit on you publicly like that. And of course, he kind of backtracked because of the white slavers comment and everything. But he felt awful about that. And not only did Lucas's wife call Bob Iger and apologize, Lucas wrote a letter and apologized. Lucas came out and retracted his statements. So yeah, Lucas isn't going to shit on Disney like everybody's trying to make him seem out like he would.
Appearances occurred because of the character's popularity. After The Phantom Menace, fans have wondered the prequels would be better films if Maul had lived. But Maul had made notable progression in terms of character and exposure due to the new stories he's been involved with. Where did this new appreciation from the prequels come from? Some people have always been prequel fans, since their original release. But now that it's been 20 years, the fans that have grown up with the prequels see the merit in the films, and even argue that they're better than the fans of old give them credit for.
I always thought of how I might redo the prequels, and I wanted to know how you would do them. How would you do the story your way?
I would have done it exactly as George Lucas did it.
And I agree with you, Chaos. What proof do you have of that? I'm sorry, but like George Lucas hates the sequels. He probably doesn't like them narratively. I mean, there's things that he probably isn't like a fan of, maybe in the direction of retreading the original trilogy, but you have no proof that he hates the sequels. And him not showing up for the premiere of Rise of Skywalker. You want to know why he wasn't doing that? Because he was in Orlando and he was going to the Rise of the Resistance opening. It was like a private thing for George Lucas. So he was doing something Star Wars related when that movie came out. And funny story about that, he went up to one of the cast members at Rise of Resistance, and they were they do First Order officer stuff, so they're dressed up as First Order. And he walked up to one of them and was like, "Hey, you all die in the next movie, right?" It's not a big spoiler, but it was a spoiler at the time that the First Order lost. So yeah, I don't believe this whole narrative of that. Not only he hated the sequels, but that like him not showing up to the premiere for the Rise of Skywalker was because he wasn't invited or something like that. You could have said that about The Force Awakens. He didn't want to show up to that. He openly did not. Well, not openly. He definitely did not want to show up to that, and it took the convincing of Kathleen Kennedy and his wife to go to that. But the premiere for the Rise of the Rise of Skywalker. I was going to call it something else for some stupid reason. The reason he didn't show up for that is because he was in a completely different state.
For any other answer, hit me on the internet.
You can see fandom's newfound appreciation from the documentaries of the films like The Prequels Strike Back. Small communities in the fandom have also voiced their love for the films. These communities have put out theories on the prequels, like the Ring Theory, or Darth Jar Jar Theory, that have become popular in the Star Wars fandom. Today, fans feel ashamed for the treatment certain actors received after the backlash towards The Phantom Menace. Mainly, the harassment that was targeted at Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best. Jake Lloyd was unfortunately arrested in 2015, and is now in a psychiatric facility, where he's diagnosed with schizophrenia. His life, sadly, taken down a different path than what everyone had hoped for him. His co-star Ahmed Best went through a lot of struggles as well. Ahmed talked about his attempts at suicide due to the harassment that he received. Thankfully for Ahmed, things seem to have improved in his life, and he's often said that given the chance, he would do it all over again. In April of 2019, Ahmed Best attended the Phantom Menace 20-year anniversary panel at Star Wars Celebration. He received a standing ovation from the fans.
I wish I had gotten a better shot of Ahmed Best doing that, because actually he was there for the Phantom Menace panel and Star Wars Celebration, and I was there specifically for this documentary, but I did not get anything worthy of the documentary.
Other actors like Ewan McGregor, who played a young Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace, have spoken out about the newfound appreciation of the prequels, saying in an interview, George Lucas wanted to do something very different with the prequels. That's why people felt cheated. It was upsetting.
Okay, Ben Bamboo. All he has said about the sequels, like, officially, was The Last Jedi was beautifully made. He apparently liked Rogue One a lot. He said with The Force Awakens in a screening with Kathleen Kennedy that, it was unoriginal and there's nothing new. That was kind of it. So when you say in so many words and actions, I need you to, specifically show me something. Something he, literally said. It's like when people say, hey, show me that the sequels are being retconned. And they're like, well, it's in The Mandalorian. I'm like, okay, where? They're like, watch The Mandalorian. It's in it. It's like, no, it is on you to fucking prove it. If you really have something, quote George Lucas directly where he says he does not like the sequel trilogy, or he openly took a shot at it, because I guarantee to you, buddy, you're just not going to find it. Okay, yeah, I just said that, though. All he said that it was a rehash of New Hope. That's not him saying that it's shit, though. It's completely different. You're saying he didn't like the sequels. There's him saying he doesn't like the sequels, and then there's him saying it's not new, it's unoriginal. That's also just one fucking movie. How do you go from he said it was shit when he said this is unoriginal, this is just, there's nothing new to it, and then he goes to The Last Jedi and he says that was a beautifully made film? How does that correlate in your mind to go, oh, well, he thought it was shit? No, if anything, that just shows he's a fucking indecisive person. Yeah, Bamboo, you're talking yourself, or maybe I'm talking myself into a circle at this point. But anyways.
When people would laugh and joke about it. Now, many years later, the prequels mean a lot to the generation that were kids then. So from smirking cynical opinions, now I'm getting feedback from the kids they were made for. I'm really happy about that. If there's one thing fans of the prequels and even the critics can agree on, is that Ewan McGregor is one of the best parts of the new trilogy. 20 years after The Phantom Menace, he is a fan-favorite character, and there's much demand for a standalone film about the character, with
Woo, we're getting a show!
Ewan McGregor reprising his role. Star Wars has a history of what-if scenarios, and one question fans will always ponder is what if The Phantom Menace was a better film? What if audiences loved the film, like they did for the original Star Wars trilogy? If there was no backlash towards the prequels, perhaps George Lucas would have never sold the franchise.
Yeah, George isn't someone who likes to come out and stir the pot or anything. He hates attention. If he knows something he says will bring him a lot of attention, he will do his damnedest to avoid it.
He mentioned in a recent interview with James Cameron his plans for the Star Wars sequel trilogy if he had kept the rights to Star Wars. What he notably mentioned was that the fans would have hated the films, like they did with the fans.
All right, we got to go back to Ben Bamboo. Buddy, this is where I get annoyed with you guys. Read between the lines. Okay, so you can't give me a specific quote. You can't give me anything he specifically did. But then you have to tell me you got to read between the lines. That's like that's like when people defend the Star Wars prequels and they go, they're actually secretly brilliant. You got to read between the lines about Darth Jar Jar. No, I don't have to read between the fucking lines. If he's going to say something, he should just come out and say it. But I've also kind of debunked what you're trying to say of read between the lines when George Lucas literally told Bob Iger, I'm not going to openly slander you guys because I'm the biggest stockholder. If anything, George Lucas is the biggest shill of all time because the more money Disney makes, the higher his stock goes up and the higher his dividend payment goes up. He's not going to slander Star Wars. And he's been on set of the sequel, well, not the sequels. Well, I think, yeah, he's been on set for a couple of those, but he's been on set for The Mandalorian multiple times. So why would he, if he's so fucking upset about the sequel trilogy and he hates Kathleen Kennedy so much, why was he having coffee with her? Hey, come on. No, he's fine. Yeah, he just wants to be left alone. He doesn't care. All right. Oh no, my computer might have froze. Nope. Am I good? Yeah, I think we're okay.
The Star Wars film released instead of A New Hope, would Star Wars still have been a culture phenomenon? China's first Star Wars movie was actually The Phantom Menace, not the original in 1977 that the rest of the world was able to enjoy. This led to a more interesting
I agree with
perspective
you, Lord
on
Vader. I
Star
don't
Wars
think
for
you guys
Chinese
can either.
audiences. They did not share the same experience of growing up with the original Star Wars trilogy, and therefore did not have any nostalgia or fond memories of Star Wars. The Phantom Menace was a fresh start for the Star Wars franchise in China, and it did not perform well. Episode 1 only made $4 million in the Chinese box office. 20 years later, Star Wars still struggles to capture the attention of the Chinese audiences. This easily could be due to the original trilogy not having the same culture impact on China like it did everywhere else in the world. The Phantom Menace disappointed Star Wars fans that eagerly awaited a new Star Wars film. It also disappointed Chinese audiences who wanted to see why everyone spoke so highly of Star Wars. Different movies appeal to different people. In 1977, Star Wars was a different movie that changed how people look at film and how they made it. In 1999, George Lucas created a different Star Wars movie, one that pushed the envelope of digital technology and is credited as the birth of digital filmmaking. 20 years later, we still feel the impact that the Phantom Menace had, not only on Star Wars, but in the world. Jar Jar is cinema's most hated character, but he's also the first fully CGI character. The Phantom Menace sparked a community of fan edits that's still going strong over 20 years later. There are now thousands of fan edits for Star Wars that would not be possible without the Phantom Edit or the Phantom Menace. Characters like Darth Maul are still fan favorites and are prominent in Star Wars to this day. Fans have been asking for Ewan McGregor to reprise his role as Obi-Wan in his own Star Wars standalone film. Appreciation for the Phantom Menace has also grown, likely because the kids who watched it are now more grown. In a few years,
Wow. I said the appreciation for the Phantom Menace has now grown. Likely because the fans who loved him are now more grown. I should really work on the writing for these in the future as well. And god damn it, Ben Bamboo! No, I'm playing, buddy. I know everyone's saying to ignore Homeboy. Yeah, but Ben, we already talked about this earlier. He wasn't saying it as in like, oh, the sequels suck. Like, you tell me to read between the lines. All he said in that is that episodes 1 through 6 are my own vision and my own philosophy. And he quite literally says, Star Wars has gone beyond my control. Tell me where that is slander for Disney. Would like you to read between the lines, as you say.
Star Wars fandom will be made up of fans who grew up watching the prequel trilogy.
Very
the perception of the Phantom Menace is a lot different than the previous generation of fans. These younger fans did not see the original trilogies in theaters. They had no expectations for the film. Now that they've grown up with the film, it's natural to be nostalgic for it. Will the generation of fans growing up with the sequel trilogy repeat history? In 20 years, will The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens be looked upon with a newfound appreciation? Today, the fans of the prequels will admit the faults in its writing and dialogue. Most fans now agree that George Lucas had too much control over the Phantom Menace, but they also argue that he gets too much hate for the prequels. The year is now 2019. Star Wars.
The year is now 2022. Oh no, wait, 2021. Man, even I'm stupid.
Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, will be the final installment to the Skywalker saga. This marks the end of the story that began with the Phantom Menace.
I think George Lucas, he started this out as a nerd, making space movies that him and his friends could relate to, that he loved writing, it was his passion. And I think the more it went on, and the further popularity and fame it gained, the more demand and pressure it was on him. And I feel like at some point, it just wasn't fun for Lucas to make movies anymore.
Yeah, I interviewed that guy for a little bit, and was unfortunately the only like actual audio and video that I had of anybody I interviewed for this documentary. But I promise you, I will be doing more interviews for future documentaries. I really like interviewing people for this stuff because the fans are what makes this so fun.
Haven't liked any of them really, and they especially haven't liked the last two. So,
well, exactly.
Hey, I mean, it can't get any worse.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, when they go after your writing, your directing, it has to hurt.
Oh, it always hurts.
It has to hurt.
It hurts a great deal. But part of making movies is you get attacked.
The Phantom Menace is now 20 years old. Never again will a film be as anticipated as this one. It was truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience to see this movie in theaters in 1999. 20 years later, the film is still not a fan favorite, but it isn't slandered and hated on anymore. Is it just a nostalgia of the film that has modern-day Star Wars fans defending it, or was the film simply misunderstood when released? 20 years later, the one saying that seems to still fit the Phantom Menace best is that it's a pretty good, bad film.
Well, that's it, everybody. That is my my documentary, and I would say not my proudest work, but I guess some could say my best work, my most popular. It is unfortunately not my favorite thing that I've done, but we're working on it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I like that documentary. I think this is my magnum opus. Sorry that's the case. I hope I get a better one in the future. Oh God, here we go. Ben says, meaning he disagrees with the direction they're going in now. Are you really denying he's saying that? Don't know why you're going to bat so hard for his supposed love of the sequels. When did I say he loves the sequels? Like what when now go back and quote me on that. Like, you can't straw man this, bro. You're not going to gaslight me, because here's the thing. I don't fucking care about the sequels or the prequels. That's what's great about being Star Wars only, is that I really have no horse in the race, but I like being factual. How does him saying the Star Wars franchise has gone beyond his control? How is that saying that he disagrees with the direction they're going in now? How do you get that at all? When Dave Filoni has said that he's really happy with The Mandalorian, and he called The Last Jedi a beautifully made film. How does that how does that prove what you're saying here? That he doesn't agree with the direction they're going. What he actually said. That's not me trying to. No, bro, he doesn't like them. I'm sorry. I don't know how you can't see that. No, I can see that. I can't see. Oh God, fuck. I'm gonna talk myself into a corner here, because I'm not even actually talking to this person verbally. You know, I feel like you're trying to find something like this is like conspiracy shit, where you look at what George Lucas says, you're like, oh, wait, he really meant this, instead of taking it at face value. Him saying I no longer have control of the sequel trilogy anymore is just him saying I don't have control. He basically said he doesn't have control of Star Wars anymore. That's it. That's not him shitting on anything. Yeah, George took a backseat in Empire Strikes Back, not because of so what happened with that was George was making Empire, and he was having financial problems. They had to figure out, well, how the fuck are we going to fund this movie now? And that's where they bring in Irvin Kershner to direct it, and George was going to be a producer, the executive producer, and then Gary Kurtz was going to deal with the day-to-day stuff on set. So it was kind of a rough thing for George to do. Oh, I almost pressed in the broadcast, and that would have been bad. I actually don't think I'm going to be able to do what I want to do, because I don't think my Wi-Fi or Miss Only's Wi-Fi is acting up. Don't get upset. It's all good. It just seems like you're denying reality. But see, that's the thing, buddy. I think you're denying reality. Like, I genuinely do. I've yet to see. If George Lucas comes out and shits on the sequels, I don't care, because I'm going to be like, hey, you're right. They fucked up. I don't like them. But I'm not going to say he does when he hasn't yet. I'm not backing down a bit. You don't have to back down. I mean, you're not proving any points, though. Like, I'm trying to do you a favor and pull up the exact video you're talking about so I can do it. It's just my laptop goes dirt slow when we're doing these streams. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it on my phone then, so I can just play the audio for you guys. George, what is it called? George Lucas new interview. And of course, Star Wars series, the first guy to show up. God, he would fucking do a live stream reaction to it. The comments are turned off of this one. There's Melody. Let's see if I can skip through and find the one that one kid asked, because I remember what the kid looks like. He's a young guy. I think he was darker with nice curled hair. Skipping through. Oh my God, there's so many kids. Here he is.
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But
Okay.
The first 6.
Okay. He literally says, I kind of lost control over Star Wars. Let's just go back 10 seconds.
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended.
Okay. What do you take from that? Are you taking that he doesn't like the direction of Star Wars? Him saying that it's going on a different path than I intended is him saying, hey, I don't own this anymore. So whatever route is going, whether it's the exact route I laid down for them or the same story treatments or whatever, that's just him basically saying it's going a different route than what I intended, because I don't own it anymore. I'm not the one creating the stories. Because then on one hand, you could say he's shitting on Dave Filoni. If we're going to read between the lines like you are, if you think that's him slandering Star Wars, then I guess Dave Filoni can go fuck himself, because Clone Wars Season 7 clearly wasn't what George intended. Mandalorian Season 1 and 2, those are awful because it's not what George intended. No, you're not saying that, but you're saying that about the sequels. You can't be selective about that. George isn't saying that they ruined Star Wars. He's just saying it went a different route because he doesn't own it. But let's keep playing the audio.
But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy. And I think that philosophy sort of goes beyond any particular time, because it's based on history, it's based on philosophy, it's based on a lot of things. And the first 3 basically tell you how.
Yeah, I'm with Stephanie on this. Is that what you're getting from this is him just saying that they were not written about him. And Ben is saying he never once said anything about Mando. Okay, but you're saying that I have to read between the lines of his opinion on the sequels because of this specific interview. But now you're saying that you're not saying anything about Mando, but he didn't even mention the sequel trilogy. He just said the first 6 films are very much mine. So now it's not what I'm saying is you're taking from this interview him shitting on the sequels. What I'm telling you that with that kind of mentality, I can take this, what he is saying in this, I can apply that to anything about Star Wars now. I can now say, oh, well, since the first 6 episodes were all him, the new Clone Wars isn't him. The new Mandalorian isn't him. Anything after George Lucas is no longer his Star Wars. So it's no longer his direction of Star Wars. I don't think you can use that to say, well, it sucks now. Is the Star Wars game show still happening? I didn't know that was still happening.
A democracy turns into a dictatorship, and you end up with a tyrant, the emperor. It's a very important now, where we are now in our political history. The other part was that in there, it's...
Yeah, he still hasn't said anything. See, the first 6 are my philosophy. Okay, but what is that? How is that him shitting on the sequels? Like, you're not making sense here. Because him making the first 6 movies is just him saying, yeah, I made the first 6 movies. Those are my philosophy because I made them. I wrote those movies. Except for pretty much, I guess you could say Empire, because a lot of that was Larry Kasdan. But still, he wrote the first 6 movies. So, yeah, they are his philosophy. 7, 8, 9, Rogue One, Solo, he didn't write those. So they probably aren't his philosophy. But him saying that the first 6 are his philosophy is not, in turn, him shitting on the other movies. How are you going to bring that? Meaning that he no longer agrees with their direction. That's not true at all. You're just picking what you want to hear. It's like what he's saying is going in one ear and out the other, and then when it comes back in your ear, you're like, this is how I want to hear it. Come on, dude. Like, I'm so confused, man. I'm so confused. He hasn't, so that's not a good argument. He said that. I'm really confused on what you're talking about, Ben. I'm so confused at this point. Like how you hear him say 1 through 6 are my philosophy, and then you internalize that and go, oh, okay, so he said fuck the sequels. Got it. No, that's not how that works. That's not how it works. I'm trying to think of another situation of a creator doing something like that. Who could we use? Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder could go, oh yeah, that trilogy, that's very much so my philosophy on, the superhero genre. But the rest of the DC movies are not. That's not him going, oh, Aquaman sucks. Suicide Squad sucks. No, that's just him saying, hey, those aren't my movies. They're not going to, you can't teach a lesson that I have when I'm not the one making the film. I can only give you my story if I'm the one making the film. Someone else is making it. It's no longer my story. That's all Lucas is saying. George Lucas is a god. Disney Star Wars is not comparable, not even slightly. All right, you calling him a god is where I start losing brain cells, guys. Look, I just doubled your bank account. You probably did. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. How involved was George with the Clone Wars? Not very in the last probably 3 or 4 seasons. He was a very active writer. So like the Mortis arc, he came in, he pitched that was all his idea. But other stuff was mostly Dave Filoni, a lot of it spin-off stories. He finally allowed creative freedom when it came to that. He was kind of done with everything after Revenge of the Sith. Even when it came to Star Wars Underworlds, that was stories that he came up with, but he brought in showrunners and writers to work on that. He had a lot of people working on that stuff. So he was involved, but not as involved as you'd want him to be. Back to my buddy Ben. He says, why would he go out of his way to say that? Wait, he didn't go out of his way, though. It was an interview. Some kid asked him about fuck. Now, God damn it, Ben. All right, let's listen to what the kid has to ask then.
Amazing. But I got Jeremiah Camacho, one of our 8th graders, who has a question about Star Wars. So
Okay, so Jeremiah, 8th grader, wants to ask about Star Wars.
we'll go from the sublime to the sublime.
Cool background, Jeremiah.
Well, thank you. My name is Jeremiah. I'm in the 7th grade, and I really like Star Wars. So my question for you is, the world has changed so much since the first Star Wars movie. How do you think the changes in the fights for racial justice will impact the Star Wars universe going forward?
Wow, it didn't mention the sequels once.
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine.
Okay, yeah. So the kid's kind of asking like the relation that Star Wars has with racial issues going forward in storytelling. But he didn't say anything about. Oh, God damn it, Ben. I'm going to fucking kill you. He's like, I'm back. I'm sorry. Missed some of what you said. All right, Ben. So we're just going to go back and listen to specifically what the fucking kid said.
I don't know. I mean,
the world has changed so much since the first Star Wars movie. How do you think the changes in the fights for racial justice will impact the Star Wars universe going forward?
So he's asking, how does he think racial justice will be influential in the Star Wars storytelling going forward?
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended.
Okay, so yeah, yet again, you read between the lines of him shitting on the sequels by saying that he lost direction of Star Wars or lost control of it and it's going a different direction than he intended. All he is talking about is in reference to what the kid asked him of Star Wars' relation with racial justice going forward. And George Lucas saying, I have no fucking idea. I don't own the franchise anymore. How the fuck does that have anything to do with the sequel trilogy? And you know what's funny is I know Star Wars Theory quite literally looked at this video and probably said, nah, he's taking a shot at the sequels, because that's what a lot of people do. I was saying, why would he say that about the sequels but not about Mando? But he didn't say that about the sequels. He didn't say that about anything. That's what I'm getting confused with, buddy. I'm waiting for you to get that point, Ben. I'm sorry. Anyways. We hit 2 hours. I think we're good. Charlie, you are a prequel shill, and that's okay. I would say I'm an original trilogy shill, but I feel like that just makes me an automatic Star Wars fan. Are there anybody out there who just doesn't like the original trilogy? Are any of you Star Wars fans who are just like, you know what? Those films are old and they suck. I would like to meet them. Not because I would be pissed at them, but just because I could look at them and go, huh. Like it's funny how things go full circle. All right, no, I can't, Ben. You can't get me on that. Sounds a bit embittered though. You don't hear it? No, I don't. We're not going to get into the whole. Oh well, you got to look at George Lucas's body language. You got to look at the tone of his voice. He's George. He's awkward. He's short. He's got diabetes, and he's a dad. He's worn the same fucking shirt. Look at the image on your screen right now, guys. Look at. Have you not seen George Lucas wear that same goddamn shirt for the past 40-odd years? 40-odd fucking. Let's just go to a random part in the documentary and see if we can just find George Lucas. Oh, maybe not. He always wears that shirt. This is all just Star Wars footage at this point. Oh well, you can find so many Star Wars quotes and not quotes, pictures behind the scenes of George wearing the same damn shirt. He hasn't changed. One flannel shirt and blue jeans. George is probably 5'6", maybe 5'7" at most. Mexicanican? I don't know. George is very stoic in that he just lets it be. He does, and frankly, I don't believe he cares anymore at this point. He's proud of the first 6 and that whole he's about. Yeah, he's done. He's done with it all. He's probably going to do one more freaking movie, maybe not Star Wars, of course, but one more thing when he's like, all right, I'm done. Bye. Thank you for the memories, film industry, and thank you for the money. You guys do know George Lucas is the richest director of all time, the richest filmmaker of all time. There's literally no one who's made more money than him. And ironically, people like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, all these guys who
came up with George Lucas, made so many more films than he did, made so many better films than he did, yet still incomparable. George Lucas made not even probably half the films they did and made so much more money and was so much more influential. It's great. Last one, Charlie Spurs says, George needs to start a fashion brand, Lucas Flannel. Honestly, he'd make some good money from that because I'd be there every day rocking that George Lucas look. You guys, y'all hate me now, but wait until God, how old am I? I'm 20. George is 48. I think he's 48. So give me some years, all right? Give me another 50 years. Oh, fuck, I don't want to give it 50. Can we give it 45? 40 years, and I'll look like George Lucas, and then we'll all be good. I own George. I own the Bob Iger book. I've read that thing front and back multiple times. You guys, I don't know what you're talking about. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Thank you. We're ending the stream. My computer's lagging up on me again.
That's great.
It's going to be great.
That's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
That's going to be great.
All right, yeah, see, I don't even know if that played or not because it lagged so hard on my part. Anyways, thank you all for joining. This was a fun stream. I actually had a really good watch party with you all. Thank you for sticking around the whole time, and I hope you guys did enjoy the Phantom Menace 20 years later, 2 years later documentary. It's going to be a thing that we always have to do every few years, I guess. But thank you all for watching. Go watch the Phantom Menace if you want to go watch it. Go enjoy your day and your night on Star Wars Only. I will see you all next time, and may the Force be with you always.